Good evening. Welcome to the July 21st, 2015 Planning and Zoning meeting. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, then a moment of silence. Could we please have roll call from left to right?
Anthony Sutton.
Mike Dolan.
John Grant.
Jean Servine.
Edward Mead.
Carl S. Moore.
Tom Nickel.
Tom Panzella.
Jim Quish.
I am Ben Gettinger, also present, David Sulkus, City Planner, and Phyllis Leggett, Board Clerk. The first item on the agenda is 33 Melba Street, Zone R-5.
Good evening. My name is Dave from Compass Builders, and I'm here tonight to present a CAM application for OMDP Enterprises LLC at 33 Melba Street. We've been working with Stephen Harris, the zoning officer, on the project. The house is a single-family home on the ocean. Our goal is to knock the existing structure down and replace it with a new house. The plan has us building a new home that has been designed to deal with the flood issues that are presented today, the challenges. Some of the highlighted features of the plan before you show that the home is located in the VE zone. In order to get the best flood insurance rate and the flood flush protection, we have the house being set at elevation 17 to the lowest membrane, which is the highest that gives us the nice discounted flood insurance and helps protect the structure. We also have designed stormwater management to deal with water runoff created by the house. The foundation we designed conform with the VE standards to allow for tidal waters, if needed, to pass underneath the proposed dwelling without damage to the foundations. All walls on the plan that are constructed in the flood area are designed to be breakaway walls, and you can see in this plan there's not very many breakaway walls at all. There will be no point of discharges of stormwater directly into Long Island Sound. We will not be stockpiling any material on the site, as it is a very small site, and we also have filter fabric fence around the site, as you can see on the site plan. The house is designed outside of the 20-foot of high tide watermark. We submitted the plan to Stephen Harris, Gary Wassmer, town engineer, and Chris Staley, public works director. After reviewing the plan, they each gave me their comments. We took all those comments, put them into the plans that are before you, and that's where we are today.
Thank you. Any comments from staff?
Not this evening.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Nickel.
Are you removing and replacing the seawall, or does it remain there?
It is remaining as is, not being touched.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, would anyone like to make a motion? Mr. Quish.
I'd like to make a motion to approve as presented.
Having a motion,
Second.
Mr. Nichols seconds. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Anyone against? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
The next items on the agenda are for public hearing, closed by 8/25/15, expires on 10/29/15, 41 James Street, Zone R-5.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Arthur Seckler. I'm principal of Lothrop Associates here this evening representing John and Kathy Mortimer. Joining me this evening is Louis Maldonado, one of my colleagues, as well as John and Kathy Mortimer. The homeowners are present, and Mr. Codispoti, our consultant. We are working with the State of Connecticut Department of Housing. The homeowner has applied for assistance under the Community Development Block Grant to reconstruct their home to pre-storm Hurricane Sandy storm conditions. The existing home will be demolished and replaced with a modular home. We are seeking the board's approval of a special use permit, given the fact that we will be within 25 feet of the high tide, as well as approval of the CAM application. It will be a reinforced concrete foundation. We will be 1 foot above the 500-foot flood elevation. That is part of the guidelines that HUD will require as part of the funding of the project. With that, I'll entertain any questions that the board may have regarding our application, or if you have anything for Mr. Codispoti.
Thank you. Any comments from staff?
No.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Nichol.
This proposed modular home, this is almost in the street. Is there any way to push that back at all?
We actually did push the home back on the lot. It is currently 3.1 foot from the front yard, and we are moving it to 17 foot from, off the front yard, off the front.
We do meet front yard minimum setbacks.
Any further questions from the board? Mr. Mead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nothing to do about the plans, but a modular home, how do you plan on getting it down East Broadway and down James Street? I mean, it's not part of our decision, but just for curiosity.
Good evening, Joseph Codispoti, Codispoti and Associates. We've done a few of these. We've actually cut through the state park. They've gotten permission to open up the gate down there. We did one on East Broadway 727, I think it was, where they brought in the truck that way. And then, if that's necessary, they forklift it and with down the street. It's pretty interesting to watch, actually.
Okay, thank you. Just want to know.
Any further questions from the board? Seeing none, we will now open this up for public comments. Before I read the procedures, is there anyone here to comment on this application? And this is the 41 James Street application. Seeing no one, any further questions from the board before we close the record? We will close the record. Does anyone see any reason why we can't vote tonight? Seeing none, would anyone like to make a motion? Ms. Servine?
I'll make a motion for approval that would include the requirements by the engineering department.
I'll second. Having a motion and a second, Mr. Grant, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Anyone against? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
The next item on the agenda is 33 Schoolhouse Road, Zone CDD-3.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Thomas Lynch. I'm an attorney with the law firm Lynch, Trembecki, and Boynton. My office is located here at 63 Cherry Street in Milford. And what I would like to do tonight, I spoke to Mr. Sulkus earlier in the day. I'd like to open the public hearing and then have the matter continued to your August 4th meeting. We were all prepared to come before you tonight with a full presentation. This is an application on behalf of CT Storage of Milford, LLC, for the construction of a self-storage facility consisting of 2 buildings on the property at 33 Schoolhouse Road. We received David's memorandum that he submits to the board prior to the meetings, and there was an issue that was raised regarding the landscape buffer that's required under Section 516 of our regulations. It's going to involve an alteration to the plans, so we discussed it earlier today, and the thought was to open the public hearing and have the matter continued to present revised plans to you at the August 4th meeting.
Mr. Lynch, I was going to bring this up prior to what you just said, but as long as we'll have the public hearing continue for 2 weeks, there's no problem as far as I'm concerned, but the sign, the special exception sign, really is not displayed in any manner that's easy for anyone to see.
Really? I was not down there. I know that...
Yeah, you'll see when you get down there, but so would you, before the next public hearing or tomorrow, post it near the street so people can see it?
I'll make sure that that's taken care of, Gene. Thanks. I didn't go down there myself. I know that actually the listing real estate agent, Mr. John Bergen from H. Pierce, had been kind enough to pick up the placard. I had instructed him to place it on the residence at 33 Schoolhouse Road, so I didn't go down to check to see how it was put up.
It is on the house, but like the house is about 30 feet back from the road, and you just can't see it at all.
So we'll make sure that it's put on a placard sign.
Fine, thanks.
Okay.
Excellent. So with that, we will continue to August 4th.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is 335 Meadowside Road, Zone R-12.5, and it is a resubmission for special permit and site plan review approval to construct a 15-unit multifamily complex under 830G.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Thomas Lynch, representing the applicants on this matter, Buddy and Chris Field, who are with me tonight. And as we all know, this matter appeared and was the subject of a public hearing in June. The board saw fit to approve this application, which was originally an application to allow the construction of 18 two-bedroom units on the site in accordance with Section 830G of our statutes. Now, under that statute, there's a proceeding where we can come back for a second presentation to you, and quite bluntly, there's no disagreement on my client's part to the majority of the conditions that were placed on this approval. The approval that Ms. Servine had motioned and was approved was to reduce the number of units from 18 units to 15. It involved the removal of one of the buildings. There was originally 6 buildings. One of the buildings would be removed with the 3 units in that building. Jean's motion also called for the construction of a sidewalk to allow children to walk from the rear of the property directly out to Meadowside Road, so the revised plans have incorporated that. We've also incorporated a greenscape and a recreational area to the open space area to the rear, which again you see on the revised plans that were submitted to you. And you know, quite bluntly, I think we're all aware of the standard of review by a court on an appeal, and I really appreciated the comments, that, especially that Ed Mead had made in a public forum at the last hearing, encouraging public discussion of a compromise of these kind of applications. And as I had said at the conclusion of my comments, these applications do generate a lot of emotion. They do generate public comment. We saw a good number of the neighbors in the Meadowside area come out and speak against this project. But the board also recognizes the limitations that the statute puts in regards to the presentation and the review and the consideration of these applications. So in the spirit of compromising this, my clients have chosen to revise the plans, bring them to you tonight. I think that the spirit of reducing the density from the 18 units to the 15 units was really the crux. If I'm not correct, correct me, but I think that was the concern, and especially Michael Dolan had made that comment, and Jim Quish had made that comment, Tom Panzella had made the comment that density was the issue, and we've come back to you now with plans that address that. We've reduced the density from 18 units to 15 units, but the one thing that we are seeking as a compromise, and interestingly enough, Section H of 830G provides for us to come back to you tonight with this resubmission. And it speaks, and it's interesting that the word viability is used in the statute. The statute specifically says that if the commission approves an application with conditions that affect the viability of the development, then we can come back and ask you, prior to taking an appeal to court, to consider a compromise. And with any land use project, with any investment by a real estate developer on a piece of property, economics comes into play. And that's why the word viability is included in the statute. So, quite bluntly, my client is willing to reduce the number of units from 18 to 15. The practical effect of that, it will reduce the rental income coming in on the property by some $50,000 a year. and he's willing to do that to avoid a prolonged court appeal with the expense of that. But the one thing that we are before you tonight seeking is to have the number of the affordable units remain at the 5 units that we had originally proposed, and that meets the standard of the statute. The statute calls for 30% of the units to be set aside for those who meet the income guidelines, and we've submitted this application on a resubmission to you, seeking to have the number of affordable units remain at 5 with the 80% margin, the 80% income level for the area and statewide median to calculate the rent for those units. So, quite bluntly, that's why we're here. And we ask that you consider that. We feel that we've acted in good faith. We also feel that on an appeal, we would prevail. I can tell you honestly, in my opinion, there was nothing in the record during the public hearing that constituted any sort of evidence that would allow a court on reviewing the record to find that this project impacts on public health and safety. We came in with a traffic expert with uncontroverted traffic data, and that was disputed by a gentleman that was hired, a traffic consultant hired by one of the neighbors, Mr. Hua, who, upon a question from Ben Gettinger as to whether, in his opinion, he felt that the traffic that would result from this project would have a negative impact on public safety, his response was, it's the burden of proof on the applicant to show that it won't have an adverse effect on public safety. And that flies completely against the statute. The language, as you know, and I've mentioned it on each of the applications I've presented to you over the last 2 years, the statute says that the burden is not on my client. The burden is on the commission to prove that the public health and safety impacted by this application, a negative impact from this application, would outweigh the need to encourage the development of affordable housing in Milford. So that alone, in the record, constitutes evidence that there certainly was no contrary evidence or data to dispute our traffic expert. And again, I don't want to argue the case before you. What I'm arguing is we want to avoid going to court. We want to work with you. My clients, as I said in my presentation to you, their family have been builders here in Milford for 30 years. And these 2 young gentlemen are going to be looking to build many more projects in the future, and they want to work with you. And in that spirit, we're asking for a consideration. We're going to reduce the units. We're going to put in the sidewalk. The reduction in the units results in 17 visitor spaces now, which increases the number of the visitor spaces. All of the requests that you made in your motion for approval, we've met. The one thing we are asking for is to have the 5 units designated as affordable, because that does affect the overall income that would be produced from the property. So with that, if you have any questions, we'll entertain them. We've revised the plans, as I've mentioned. There is one last-minute note that came from David this afternoon. There was a memo from Chris Saley talking about putting in another galley for stormwater runoff. I have a letter that I'm going to submit to you from our engineer, Bob Weway, who presented this application to you. And just to read that in the record, his response to the Saley email was, Dear Mr. Sulkus, the plans for 335 Meadowside Road revised to 62215 provide for a reduction in the amount of impervious surface area. The original 18 units have been reduced to 15, resulting in a reduction of 1,582 square feet of roof area. The asphalt parking has been shortened in length by 9 feet, and a 4-foot wide sidewalk added to the interior, resulting in an increase of 750 square feet of parking sidewalk cover. This provides a net decrease in the amount of impervious cover for the site of 882 square feet. No changes to the storage volume are proposed in the stormwater management system. The original plans, which were approved by the engineering department, you have a memo in your original application from Gary Wassmer approving the stormwater runoff plan. It was signed off by Chris Saley at that time. The original plans and design provide for a 0 increase in peak runoff rate and volume for all storms up to the 100-year event. This will continue to be the case with the revised plans, which far exceed the requirements of the City of Milford Engineering Department. Mr. Chairman, I did email that to Phyllis. I'd like to submit an original of this letter for the record, please. If there's any other questions, we can address them.
Thank you. Any comments from staff?
Just in the interest of brevity and clarity, you've already approved this application. The applicant has come back to you tonight agreeing to your conditions of approval. The one thing he's asking for is not to increase the number of affordable units. So this is exactly, with that one exception, what the board looked for in its approval. The other thing just to point out is, I believe in your original conditions, there was talk of the sidewalk running along the back of the units. In fact, it's been added and it's in the front of the units.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Mr. Quish.
What is the difference in the amount of rent you would charge for a affordable unit as opposed to a market rate unit? So the question is, obviously, if we added the additional unit, what is the delta between those two numbers?
I have to go back to our affordability plan, which I do have with me. I would say market rent for a 2-bedroom unit right now would be some $1,800 to $1,900. Jim, in answer to your question, at the 80% level, the market rent, the affordable rent would be $1,398 a month.
And so you're saying that it's a $500 a month difference?
Correct.
So $5,000, $6,000 a year, $60,000 over 10 years is the difference. You know, as not really a question but a statement, obviously the local community is opposed to this. And so for this board, we have to consider the 830G statute, and we are forced to accept things that the local community doesn't like. And for us to do that, kind of one of the carrots at the end of that is that we are getting our whole percentage closer to that 10%, so that we are now no longer handcuffed by 830G. And I know one unit doesn't really change the dynamic that much.
And can I have an honest response to that? I could care less about that. That's not my client's problem. That's not my client's problem.
No,
the number of points that may be accumulated by this project or Mr. Hollister's project or Bick Drive or anything else, that has no relevance to this application. It really doesn't have any relevance to this application. It may be a political consideration, but in terms of the relevance to this application and whether or not we can take this application and go to court and prevail and get 18 units with 5 of them as affordable, or 6, the original was 6 affordable. But quite bluntly, that's not my client's problem.
No, and I do understand that. So I did preface what
and
I
I
said.
used- and I
Excuse me.
Okay.
Excuse me. I'm speaking now.
Yep.
So I did preface it by saying it's really not a question, but just a statement that it is an awkward position for the board to have to allow development that the local community is not for. And I understand your position. You're representing your client. So I was just making a statement that it is, as you have acquiesced to certain conditions that were part of our approval last time, my point is that to help, the spoonful of sugar, to help the medicine go down, I would advocate for the 6, personally. Thank you.
Well, and in response, I told you quite bluntly that removing a building takes $55,000 out of my client's pocket. So all we're asking for is these other 2 units to be brought to the affordable level. That's really...
No, and I do understand that.
That's the real spoon of
True,
sugar.
but also there's the actual cost of building the unit is not in the development cost either. So it's not just all lost revenue, it's less expense to build the unit. So there's arithmetic there that we could all do together, but it's not my business to know your client's economics of the development.
But it is relevant because the statute actually addresses it. There's a reason why the word viability is in the statute. And secondly, my only other response to your comment is the neighbors that came before you and spoke, there was 40 or 50 of them. Not a single one of them talked about the rents. They could care less about the rents. They wanted the density reduced, and we've reduced the density.
Ms. Servine.
First of all, I want to say this is a really interesting precedent, I think, for us in this process to negotiate in this manner. And,
I think it's great.
And I appreciate it. I think it's very helpful. Maybe we'll be able to continue to use it in some way in the future. Yeah. One thing I wanted to say is I think the motion read, create a place for child and adult recreation. And I was wondering if Mr. Field would be open to, since there are going to be 2-bedroom apartments in each unit, I believe, each one, there will be children, and would he be open to a small toddler lot? There's a lot of green space, there's a lot of area there, I know for that.
Yes, the answer to that question is yes.
Good.
And I think you raised that on the
did.
Gulf Street one, and I think Greg Field said that was fine.
Possibly, yeah. Thank you.
I didn't even have to turn around and ask him.
Thank you. Mr.
Nickel.
Yeah, I have a safety question on this 4-foot wide sidewalk that is equal and level to the road. How does that provide any safety for anyone walking up there?
Well, Tom, quite honestly, I remember very well the discussion at the public hearing, and it was about children walking through the parking lot to get to Meadowside Road if they're going to get on a bus or if they're going to take a left turn and go down to Lou Gehrig Field and play at the fields. So I think the concern was to put a sidewalk, and that these plans address that. Whether it's level with the parking lot, it is separate from the parking lot. It's not an area where cars are going to be traversing. I think that's what, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's what everybody's thought was.
I don't see it that way on the plan. I see cars backing out of garages over top of this proposed sidewalk.
Yeah. Is there some sort of a curb in between it?
No, it's
Here, let Buddy address that, Tom. Just identify yourself.
Good evening. My name is Warren Field. I'm one of the owners of the property. Actually, the engineers themselves brought up that concern. And as you know, any sidewalk on the side of a road, you have an apron. And we have 9 aprons there. And usually the apron goes down because it has to meet the parking lot. Well, the engineer brought up a very good point, saying your sidewalk's going to be like a roller coaster. So any kid who's going to walk on or ride their bicycle, every couple feet it's going to be going up and down. And he goes, and that's not really conducive. He says, it's going to be made out of concrete. It's going to be, we're definitely going to know it's a sidewalk for that. But a lot of it, has to do with common sense when people walk on sidewalks. I've seen sidewalks in the city of Milford that are actually level with the road, and people stay off of it. I mean, there comes a point where you just have to use common sense when you're driving.
You're building this new. It's not something that's been around in Milford where the road was raised or the sidewalk sunk. All I'm interested in is something to stop a car from running across the sidewalk. And like I said, this sidewalk runs
No,
right in front of garages, and the cars back out.
Right,
And they
correct.
back right across the sidewalk without a curb to the driveway.
Right, and that's correct. And what will happen is, because these units are because it's a townhouse complex, unlike a residential neighborhood where you'll have curb cuts minimum of 50 feet apart, but in the average neighborhood, maybe 75 or 100, you know, it's much easier for the sidewalk to come back up after it's met the apron. You cannot do that in this type of situation because the close proximity of the garages to each other. The sidewalk literally will be a roller coaster. And, you know, if you have a kid running across a roller coaster and all of a sudden you have the sidewalk deviating, you know, 4 or 5 inches from where the driveway comes out to where they're going to be walking, you know, a kid could trip and fall. And the thing is, we're going to own this, and we also have to look at from safety and liability on everyone's end of it. You're welcome.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Mr. Moore.
So in addition to trying to blow up Mr. Quitch's point in regards to increasing the affordable housing apartments from 5 to 6, just trying to curious, and if you're bringing this application, what you already have to the board, as an 830G perspective, affordable housing is what we're trying to maintain or increase here in Milford. Why isn't this one of the compromises? I know you removed one of the buildings, but increasing that from 5 to 6 would probably be more suitable at this time.
And the short answer to that is that the statute only requires that 30% of the units be set aside. So 30% of a 15-unit project is 5 units. We're asking to meet the statutory standard. We're willing to reduce a building and take 3 units off, but we're asking for a consideration from you to allow us to maintain the statutory standard.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we will open this up to public comment. I will read the procedures. Please approach the podium, clearly state your name and address, and please spell your name for the record. Address all comments to the commission. If your comments have been previously presented, please refrain from repeating. State your comments clearly and succinctly, and please try to keep your comments under 3 minutes. If anyone is for the application, please approach the podium.
My name is Carol Marudis. I reside at 24 Elgin Drive. I've been there 36 years.
Could you please just spell your last name?
M-A-U-R-U-T-I-S. I would just like to say something about the traffic. I live at 24 Elgin, and I observed 2 weeks ago that the parking lot at Silver Sands, there was an overflow of traffic, and all the cars were parking on Elgin Drive. So what's going to happen when we have that overflow and they're parking on the side streets and we have this apartment building? So the traffic study, I don't feel was accurate. And I'd like to state that. That is a concern.
We won't make you redo your statement, but for the record, you're against the application, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. We'll put that in the against column. But if anyone, and I don't think there is, if anyone's for the application, could you please come to the podium?
Okay. Thank you.
We will now go, if you're opposed to the application, you could please come to the podium.
Good evening. My name is John Pagliano. I live 325 Meadowside. I was here last time. I live right next door to where they're going to build. I happen to be a site supervisor for a construction company in New Haven and also an engineering specialist. I've seen their plans. We've had this discussion before. I heard what Mr. Lyons said about the comments that we made were certain comments. I only have one thing to say to all of you. I said before, 10 months ago, my wife was hit by a car and almost killed on Meadowside Road in a crosswalk. I said this before. We found out through my lawyer last week The gentleman that hit her was trying to beat oncoming traffic. Okay? Traffic, which we have a lot of on Meadowside Road. And if you guys live in that area or drive in that area, you'll know we have a lot of traffic in that area. 18 or 15 units, double that. If there's 2 people in there, that's 30 cars more. We don't need more traffic. We don't need more affordable housing in the area. We don't need any more big housing in the area on that footprint. We've discussed this before. I'm going to reiterate. My wife was hit by a car. September, she's got to go for more surgery. Okay? This is not fun for us. This is not great for us, besides what they want to do over there. I'd like to know how many of the properties that he built have been rented. See a lot of them around town. I don't know if they're leased. And being that I do live next door, there's been an awful lot of people going in and out of that house, taking things in and out. I sure hope he's not demoing that house without a permit, because there's a lot of things going on next door. I don't like what I say. I'm just asking you people to take a good, strong look at what's going on here. All right? I'm thinking about my family and what happened to my wife. It's wrong what's going to go on there. For the neighborhood, for the traffic, which is unbelievable now over there. I don't care how many sidewalks you put in. You said it best. People drive right over sidewalks. My wife was in a crosswalk and she got hit by a car. That's what I want to say. And I thank them for trying. That's their job. But they're wrong. And so is Mr. Lyons. He's wrong. I don't know why he's disagreeing with anything you say. He has no business doing that, but that's him. He's doing his job. Like I said, I work for a construction company. I know how it goes. This is wrong. This is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Frank Ginise, G-I-N-I-S-E. I live at 331 Meadowside Road. I'd like to say good evening to the board members here for Planning Zone, Mr. Fields, our distinguished guest, Kim Rose, who's back there, Gail Schlossberg's representative, Alex Romanik. And I would just first like to start off by stating 6 weeks ago, I asked under the Freedom of Information Act exactly how many 830Gs have been denied by the city of Milford and gone up to the next level. Also, Kim Rose has done that, and so has Gail Schlossberg. As to date, we haven't received anything from the city of Milford. That's 6 weeks ago. Kind of wondering at this point, you know, I spoke to Mayor Blake myself because I was a little taken back by a comment made by Mr. Sulkus. And I spoke to him about him stating, Milford's never won an 830G, just keep that in mind. To this board, if you don't remember, you can watch the video. It is on the video on Channel 79, Public Access TV. My understanding at this point is that on June 21st, the opinion of this board was that it is okay to place 18 or possibly now 15 units on an acre on this side of town on 335 Meadowside Road. However, you said it wasn't worth the city's taxpayers' money, and I get that from a taxpayer's point of view. But I also understand you're now fighting for Pond Point, 2.25 acres, 22 units, and the house is going to be there. That's 11 units per acre. Now you're saying it's okay to fight for those 11 houses per acre to not have them put there. And now you're taking it to the next level. Again, this coming under when Mr. Sulkus made the nice comment that, remember, we haven't won an 830G. I was kind of wondering, why are we not as important? Why don't we deserve the same rights, the same treatment, we pay the same taxes as the other side? Strangely enough, I went through the information that this town gives out, which are your addresses. 9 of this board members live on the foreign side of town. 5 of these members live in close proximity to Pond Point. 3 members of this board live over in Law, Mr. Dolan being one of them. And I highly disagree with Mr. Getting that he made a bold statement of saying, I live next to it. I'll understand, but you know, it's how it is. I'm sorry, he lives on Pumpkin Delight, or he drives on Pumpkin Delight. The only time he hits Meadowside is to cross over to get out to the post road. So that was no bold statement. I'm a little confused the fact that we haven't received these information that was asked on the 830G. I'm at the thought right now that this board, or possibly the law department of the city of Milford, is stonewalling us, keeping us at bay as long as they can to get whatever needs to be done here. I'd like to, in talking about that, I'd like to ask simple math here. If 2¼ acres is worth 10 to 11 units, why is 15 to 18 okay for 1 acre? You guys have pretty much drawn a line in the sand and said, you live on the wrong side of town. We're going to fight for Pond Point. We're not going to fight for you. Our taxpayer money is worth it here. Our taxpayer money isn't worth it here. Our taxpayers will pay for 10 to 11 units on an acre, but we're not going to fight for 15 to 18 units on an acre. That math doesn't make sense, and I think you all understand that. I understand, again, that affordable housing is important. I believe that Milford is making great strides in it and trying to hit that. But you have to be fair about this. I'm sorry, if you live on that side and Pond Point's going to affect you, I'm sorry, and fight for it. But we live on this side, and we're fighting for it. And we deserve the same rights, the same treatment, because that's our taxpayer money that you're going to be using to fight that. We want to fight in ours. Now they're talking about putting a kid-friendly area in the back of that. Split rail fences. Anyone have small kids? Anyone had kids? Does the rail fence stop them? I have a 500-foot long driveway that goes all the way up that property. How many balls are going to go through there? How many kids are going to go running through there? If a split rail fence is what they want, if you so do go through with this, how is that protecting the kids and how is it protecting me? They should have thought about that. You're talking about a kid safety area. It should be a full fence. It should be covered all the way around. I don't care if it looks ugly. I'm talking about safety of me coming up my driveway, kids throwing balls, kids climbing, kids running, families playing wiffle ball, whatever the case may be. And they're talking about putting little 3 to 4 foot bushes up. What kind of barrier is that? Will you be there when that sound goes right over and you're listening to all that? I don't think anything to this project makes sense. I don't think anything that this board would think of doing outside of denying this fully and fighting as hard as they're going to, even though they've lost primarily Pond Point, for 335 Meadowside. They speak about our traffic engineer who came in. Yep, he came in, and he was asked a question if he deemed it dangerous. After explaining all the reasons why, Mr. Lynch might have forgotten that, he did say yes, it is dangerous. Their traffic engineer's information was from 2012. My traffic engineer's information was from this past year. is there not a difference between 3 years? Do things not change? The lady's absolutely right who spoke earlier. We had cars up and down Meadowside. We had cars inside and outside roads. The apartment house there, Eldridge. There were cars parked on the sidewalk on Meadowside. I just don't understand how you could do anything other than fight this with us. It is my suggestion that this board ceases and halts any further action on this until Kim Rose, her office, Gail Schlossberg's office, and myself have received the information under the Freedom of Information Act of how many 830Gs have denied by Milford and gone to the next step. And once that's done, we could have our legal look at it. Kim Rose and Gail Schlossberg could have theirs. And we can see where we go from there. Otherwise, under any other thing, if it goes forward, I do not see any other way than for us to put a temporary injunction as under Danzo versus University of Connecticut and go to court against the city of Milford and let you spend our taxpayer money fighting us in our own town to get the same rights that you want to give on the other side of town. I thank you for your time. Have a good night.
Is there anyone opposed to the application that would like to talk?
Good evening. My name is Michael Afrezzi, A-P-R-U-Z-Z-E-S-E. I live at 5 Drake Mill Drive. It's diagonally across from the project. You brought up the sidewalk issue. And from what I understand, the sidewalks are level with the driveway. Mr. Warren Field said himself, the way the buildings are so close, he can't put curved driveways there to have it step down. That shows that everybody knows it's too dense. Even 5 buildings is too big for this. And this is especially for Michael Doan. You can't fight something if you don't stand up and fight. You just can't say, because I took offense to what you said, I know it's too big, but I'm going to save the taxpayers' money. I'm going to vote yes for it. You cannot stand up and fight something that's wrong by just doing nothing. Have a good night.
Anyone else opposed to the application that would like to speak?
And I live on 7 Elgin Drive. And as the lady said earlier, July 4th was a zoo on Meadowside Road. I was worried somebody was going to park in front of my driveway. How do I get out of my house? Secondly, as they said, he's willing to take a hit on money. Well, what is the city going to do to protect us if our property values go down? We have heard nothing on our side of the fence to help us. As taxpayers for 40 years in Milford, I think that's worth a little something. And secondly, I work as a manufacturing engineer. We do design reviews similar to this, and I'll tell you what, everything looks wonderful on paper till you get in the real world. And when you get in the real world, things start happening. Am I going to be able to come to you if I get water in my yard, ponding? Who am I going to go to? What do I do? And secondly, last note, if we've got to get all kind of special permits for this, it doesn't seem like it's a good application, does it, for where you're trying to put it. Thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Chris Pagliano, Pagliano. I'm the one that got hit in the crosswalk. I'm on 325 Meadowside Road. I was walking my dog, and the dog made it, I didn't. I walk the dog every day. There's times that I sit there a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes trying to cross the crosswalk. The traffic on Meadowside is terrible. So I'm against this whole thing. Thank you.
My name is Kathleen Apruzzese, A-P-R-U-Z-Z-E-S-E. My husband and I live diagonally across from the Fields property. Totally against. It's too dense. The traffic is a nightmare. Also, people keep saying it's an acre. It's less than an acre. You know, we moved from Avon Street because there was another builder who built directly across the street from us. I said to my husband, I can't stay here anymore. We worked too hard for our money, paid too much in taxes, and now some other person that I'm sure Mr. Fields knows very well, built a house less than an acre, less than half an acre because of the grandfather laws. When is Milford going to stick up for the people of Milford, the citizens of Milford who pay our taxes? And I take offense. I am very upset, and I called the mayor 2 weeks ago about Mr. Soltis, how when Attorney Lynch was speaking, he gave him a thumbs up. And I said, how disheartening. What kind of board members do we have working for the citizens of Milford? None of you will get my vote. I said, I'm so disheartened. I am so angry that people that work hard every day of their lives, somebody who has more money can bring an attorney in, and we all know the value of that attorney as well and what they're doing in the city of Milford, and us, we don't count. Where do you draw the line? Where else am I going to move? We finally found a neighborhood. We're close to the beach. As my neighbor stated, Carol, there has been the last few weeks, people have been parking on Meadowside because the park has been closed. What's going to happen when you have 30 cars on less than an acre that's diagonally going across the road where I live on Great Meadow? Where is all that traffic going to go? My neighbor got hit by a car. How much are you going to stop? When are you going to listen to us? And if we have to take it further, our community, we will at this point. Thank you for your time.
Excuse me, I'd just like to add something. On the 21st, 7 out of 10 of the people on this board stated that the area was already too dense to build in. And one member stated that he didn't believe that all the emergency equipment that would have to go to any type of call there would fit on the property. Nevertheless, he thought it would be an accident hazard, and it will probably cause an accident backing out of there. I just forgot to mention that. Thank you.
Is there anyone else opposed to the application that would like to speak?
Yes, my name is Steve Fisher. I live at 30 West Shore Drive, F-I-S-H-E-R. If you start on the Boston Post Road, they just built a Stop and Shop a few years ago. Tremendous traffic. Up and down Meadowside to get to Stop and Shop. Go past Stop and Shop, take a right, go down Seaman's Lane. You have the Seaman, I'm not sure the name of them, the Seaman Lane condos there. 30, 40 units there. Across the street, more importantly, you have a school. I believe K through 5. Young kids walking up and down Meadowside to go to school. When you turn right onto Meadowside, across the street, you have Oyster Bay condos. Another 40, 50 units there. Go a little bit farther down Meadowside, you have the elderly complex. You guys know better than me. 100 units there maybe more. Past that, you got the new state park. This state park has grown exponentially in the last few years. There's people coming from all over the state, not even all over the state, they're coming from New York. This place is packed on weekends. Tremendous traffic up and down Meadowside. Take a right from there up the Silver Sands Expressway. On the right-hand side, you have another elderly apartment. I believe another 50, 60 units. You guys would know better than me. More crowd. This street, this area has to be probably the most dense area in the city of Milford. And now on 1 acre, just one little acre that was denied to put a single-family house on, that's not zoned for another two houses, that was denied. Now you want to put, tell me the logic, 15 more units on 1 little acre? When is it going to end? I understand developers want to make money, but this shouldn't go through. All of you know this is wrong. It is too dense an area to allow this much traffic. Thank you.
Again. I would like to invite all of you to come to my house this weekend, and please feel free to sit in my driveway and see the traffic and the nonsense that we have to deal with. Please, I invite you all. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman and honorable members of the board. My name is Kim Rose. I'm the state representative for the 118th District. I've already submitted written testimony on this application opposing it because of the traffic concerns that many of my neighbors and friends have expressed here this evening. I do understand probably better than anyone what position you are sitting in as a former member of this board, and I've had to vote on some very tough 8-30G applications during my tenure here. I would like to ask you, if you do plan on voting this application through, please do not reduce the number of affordable units. Milford must reach our minimum goal. I understand it's not this developer's problem, but it is a problem for the city of Milford, and we need to reach our affordable housing units. Thank you.
Anyone else opposed to the application that would like to speak? Seeing no one else, the applicant has a chance for rebuttal, and then the opposition has a chance to rebut the rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just ask that the full minutes of the June 2nd meeting be incorporated in tonight's minutes as part of this public hearing. I think that all of the comments that were made by the neighbors were made at that meeting and reiterated tonight, and I think that, again, we answered those concerns by reducing the number of units within the parameters of the statute. Obviously, we're not going to satisfy everybody, but I think that we have worked to reach a compromise here. Again, not to rehash it, but we have to consider the standards of review on a appeal of this, and in light of the high likelihood of this withstanding an appeal, I would ask that you agree with the compromise that we've offered to you tonight. I think that the density is the issue. It's not the number of affordable units. I haven't heard any of the neighbors other than State Representative Rose talk about the number of affordable units. They're concerned about the density, and by reducing this by one building, we have, at least in some measure of respect, addressed that. So with that, I would conclude our presentation to you. I'd ask that you act favorably on this application. Thank you.
If anyone from the opposition wants to comment on that very specific rebuttal, they're entitled to do so.
John Pagliano, Meadowside Road. In reply to Mr. Lynch, I'm going to ask the board to have a little patience with me on this one. I have a right to rebut. I have a right to say what I want, whether I said it last time or whether I said it this time. I'm going to say it again. A woman was hit and almost killed by a car, and if Mr. Lynch doesn't like me repeating myself, that's too bad. My wife is the one that was hit by a car because of the traffic. I don't care if I have to say it at 10 meetings, and I don't care to hear from him. I care to hear from you. Thank you.
Okay. So the reason of health and safety issue to deny this has already been proven, not by me, not by my traffic engineer, but by this board, by 7 of the 10 stating that it's already too dense, by just one of your board stating that a emergency service getting in there will probably not fit with all the vehicles and will most likely cause an accident. Those guidelines there meet the criteria for you to deny this application. And those are from your own words, this board. We put our trust in you. That's why you're up there. We expect you to do what's right for this town. Not just one side of the town, but both. Again, I understand that Mr. Fields is trying to do his job. Mr. Lynch is trying to help him do his job. This is the wrong area to do it in. Thank you.
My name is Michael Afrazazi. To address Mr. Lynch said about affordable housing, the neighbors are not against affordable housing. They're against the density of this project. And to repeat myself, Mr. Warren Fields said he can't put sidewalks with curves on because the houses, there's too many houses, they're so close together. Have a good night.
My name's Steve Fisher again, 30 West Shore Drive. I would like to say that the attorney does have it right. This is about density. This area is too dense. We have 3 public schools, Jonathan Law, Pumpkin Delight, and Meadowside. Kids, cars, traffic going down Meadowside Road. This is too dense an area to have this development on 1 acre land. 15 units. That is too dense. He is right.
Mr. Joseph Perkowski again. And going back to the last minute.
Can you just spell your name, please?
Perkowski. Going back to the last meeting 6 weeks ago, again, they spoke about the traffic study. Well, when they said everything was safe, and our person came in and said, he made a very valid point. You don't pick and choose intersections. That is in the meeting minutes, if I'm not wrong. The study was never mentioned about Silver Sands or anything. So how could you say to me, and I know, I understand what you're saying.
Sir, you need to address to the commission.
And the thing is, how could you pick and choose intersections and tell me everything is hunky-dory? I'm sorry. You don't pick and choose. You look at the whole area. Thank you for your time.
Hello, it's me again, Kathleen Afrazazi. I just want to also say that, yes, we have repeated ourselves a few times, but we need for you to listen. Also, I forgot, no one has mentioned this, I believe, but we have Robert Treat, we have DeMayo Drive right behind me, we have Alberta Jalad. Enough already. We have no problem with affordable housing, but enough. It's too dense. Too dense. And if you want, I'll even make you a hamburger and hot dog on Sunday. Come by.
Anyone else from the opposition for rebuttal? Mr. Lynch, as you know, you have the last rebuttal if you would like to choose it. Any questions from the board? Mr. Sutton.
Yes, I'd like to, two commendations. Number one, I'd like to commend Mr. Lynch and his clients for the spirit of cooperation that they've extended to this board. And second, I'd like to commend the residents who spoke in opposition to this application by not demonizing the concept of affordable housing. We've heard many of these public hearings, and I feel that your comments were very directed towards your particular safety concerns about this issue, which, as you do well know, is what a reviewing court looks to determine whether or not an appeal of this nature would be granted or upheld for the board's denial. Thank you.
Any questions from the board? Anyone see any reason to keep the record open? We will close the record. Would anyone like to have a discussion or make a motion? Mr. Quish?
You know, and again, I'm sure the public understands this, and I'm sure the developer and council understand it. It puts the members of the board in a very difficult situation. We are bound by the 830G law, which is very specific, and as one of the members of the community spoke out about, is that we did just lose in court for a Pond Point project that was denied by a previous board, not the same sitting board, but it did go to court and it was lost. I think that there was good faith on the developer side to come up with some kind of compromise that was based on what this board asked them to do to compromise. Personally, I will stick my heels in the sand to keep it as presented last time and have the 6 units because that helps the greater community. I understand the local residents are adamantly against this. And the reality is, if we deny it and we go to court, then you might very well get 18 units. And it's not going to be this board's fault. It's going to be the fact that we have 830G as a state regulation that the courts will enforce. It is somewhat and quite almost fully beyond our capacity to change that reality. So again, with apologies to the community, there will be a development there, and you know, and I feel badly about it. And there's just absolutely nothing that I can do, and I don't think the board can do. Personally, though, I am going to advocate for the conditions we set forth in our last meeting, and to get that 1 extra unit to help the community at large get closer to a situation where we are not bound and handcuffed by the 830G. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I know the public hearing is closed, but just for a point of order, Mr. Quish made mention in his comments just then about holding the line to the number of units that were approved last time at 6. And I want to correct him, if I may, that the board set the number of units at 7 at their last approval, not 6.
Thank you for that. I misspoke. Thank you very much.
Excuse me. What about holding up? No. What about holding up until Kim, Rose, Gail, Slaughter's office, and myself get the information?
Sir, the hearing is closed. We'll ask the question. I understand your concern, and I'll ask staff if we received a Freedom of Information Act request.
If we got a Freedom of Information request, it would have been forwarded to the city's attorney's office for action.
Okay, so again, I
Sir.
moved to hold anything up
Sir, we understand your concern, and the public hearing's closed, and you just can't yell. I'm sorry.
But you can't just throw it away either. You can't just say,
Sir, it's kind of a moot point because we don't have anyone to do anything here, but I'm asking you if you could please just sit down. You're disrupting. We understand your concern, and maybe we'll take that into consideration, but we have to run the hearing with the procedure that we run the hearing with, and I understand your concern. Well, the gentleman has a concern. He would like us to hold off on voting until his Freedom of Information Act request is complied with. It's a concern. Does anyone have any comment on that concern? Ms. Serene.
Well, it's awfully hard to be the bad guy in these situations. As Mr. Quish said, he explained it very succinctly, and we are in a very, very difficult position. If we could vote with our hearts, we would be voting very differently. But I see no point in waiting until we hear whether there was any 8-30 in the past that was approved. I just see no point in that. And again, you know, it's awful to feel chastised and to feel like you're not going to vote for anybody if we don't vote your way. But we have, as Mr. Quish said, a legal parameter to work within, and we're doing our best, I would say, within the parameters that we are given.
the state, there has been some that have.
Please be quiet, sir. You're not allowed to speak.
Please don't talk down to me.
Sir, again, you can't just yell. I understand you're frustrated, but it's a public forum. You spoke, and you have to please. And you spoke, and you had more than 3 minutes, and you spoke as many times as you wanted to. The public hearing's closed. I'm asking for you to please let us conduct the hearing. Mr. Mead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to take a 5-minute recess.
All right. Take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. If everyone could take their seats, we'll go back on the record. All right, the record's closed. We've started discussion. Anyone else on the board have any discussion? Mr. Pinzella.
I'd like to make a comment as to this application where it seems that the residents are attacking the board, and you really shouldn't be attacking the board. I think what you really should be attacking is the legislators. You need to talk to Kim, you need to talk to Gal, you need to talk to Pam, and you need to get it changed in Hartford. If you can't get it changed in Hartford, this board, our hands are tied. Because when you have all the approvals from all the city, from all the state departments, all the city departments, and everybody approves it, it goes before the judge, and he says, everything's approved. It's a rubber stamp deal. So if we deny, you're going to get 18 units. And our hearts are with you. Our hearts are with you. But you need to get some legislative action done to get 830G changed. Because if it doesn't get changed, we can't do anything. And trust me, I would vote it down in a heartbeat, but I know what's best for the city. And I know that this application is going to fly. And it makes us feel terrible. We all here have a tremendous feeling for everyone out there because we can put ourselves in your shoes. But it just comes to the point where you have to get a compromise, and I think the compromise is good.
No, the record's closed. Would anyone like to make a motion? Ms. Servine?
Thank you, Mr. Panzella. That was very well said. And I'm going to be the bad guy here, and I'm going to make a motion for approval with the addition of a fenced toddler play lot. And as it has been proposed by Mr. Lynch and written before us, that will be the only addition I would recommend.
Having a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Mead seconds the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Sutton?
I just wish to point out, more apropos to the general discussion that we've had about this, the issue was raised about the Pond Point development that is currently, or that was taken up on appeal. Certain numbers were talked about where board members live. I myself was not on the board when that decision happened, but I do wish to point out that comparing a Pond Point project to this particular project or Wheeler's Woods or any of the many other 830G applications that we've dealt with, those are taken on a case-by-case basis. We're charged as a board to address these 830G applications as the state tells us to. These are state-mandated regulations. These are not city regulations. These are not things that we voluntarily agree to do. We have to look at all of these applications, hear from residents, hear from developers, and we have to make the determination about issues of health and safety. That is how we can determine whether or not to approve these types of developments. And we have to perform a balancing act. We have to perform a balancing act between what we're charged with under the statute, what we potentially expose the city for as far as liability goes and expense, taxpayer money, versus what is very dear to us as members of this board, which is the health and safety and the property rights of our fellow citizens and property owners in this city. I just ask that you appreciate that somewhat, but also in a general standpoint, as far as opposing these types of applications, I would go out of turn a bit and commend the folks who are against Wheeler's Woods in the types of materials that they have proposed to us, the types of studies, the types of information that they have provided in opposition. This balancing act works best when the city is involved, when you're involved, coming here to talk to us. Again, I appreciate all of you coming here. I appreciate you exercising your rights to do so. I just ask that you understand a bit of the larger picture, what we're up against, similar to what Mr. Panzella said. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Mr. Quish.
So there's a motion and a second in front of us. I would advocate that the board deny that motion, and I would then make a motion to resubmit a motion to accept as originally presented at our last meeting, which includes the improvements that were made on the sidewalk, and if Ms. Servine wanted to add a caveat for better recreational space, but I feel that it's in the best interest of the community, although the local citizens take the hit in the local area, but that at least if we can get the extra 2 units of affordable housing, it brings us closer to being in a position as a board to allow our local zoning regulations to apply rather than have them skirted because the 830G statute requirement of 10% affordable housing hasn't been met yet. So I would advocate that we deny and that we go for the 7 units. Thank you.
Well, we presently have a motion on the table. Any further discussion on that motion? Mr. Mead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say that I've been on the board for several years, and I've been through 3 or 4 or 5 8-30Gs. We had one that got denied, or that got sent back to us from the courts, and we had to redo it, and that was on Merwin Avenue behind the beach house. This is the first time that we had public discussion with the applicant and their lawyers to try to come to a compromise with the application without it going to court and without them having their full application approved by the judge and coming back and tell us they're going to do what they wanted to in the first place. With the application now, with the 15 units and 30% of them will be affordable. In the addition of the green space and the sidewalks, the first time that the public had a second bite at the apple of having their public comments heard and rebutted, I think this is the best time that we've ever had this come out since I've been on the board.
Any further discussion on the motion that's on the table? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Anyone against? Motion passes. Thank you. The next items on the agenda are all related. Their public hearing closed by today by extension expires on 9/24/15. Their petition for zoning regulation change, petition for zone change, and Wheelers Farm Road, East Rutland Road, Zone DO 25.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Tim Hollister, accompanied by John Gilmore from Malone and McBroom, representing the applicant. By my count, since January of this year, we have appeared before some City of Milford Board or Commission 22 times. Not that we don't enjoy your company, but I think we have to end that tonight because we do have to close the record. So I just have very few minor items to report so that you are completely updated. And then, Mr. Chairman, what I'll do is I'll yield the podium at that point and then just reserve my right, as Attorney Lynch did, to make a final summary of why the application should be approved when you tell me that that's the appropriate time. You should have from Mr. Sulkus a I have to laugh. I called this a final supplemental materials. That's as opposed to the final supplemental materials that we gave you on June 30th. But this is the final supplemental materials, and it consists of two items. The first, and probably certainly the most important, is the Wetlands Agency approval that we received last week with some 16 conditions, all of which have been agreed to by the applicant. And the ones I want to point out to you are number 7. This is starting on page 2. And obviously, remember, everything that we agreed to at the Wetlands Commission is now part of the development process and therefore would be incorporated into the zoning process. But we've agreed to do this baseline conditions documentation report going beyond the phase 1 that has already been done to document the conditions of the property with an environmental professional, the identification of which will be approved by the Wetlands Agency. Number 8 is we've agreed to implement an invasive plant species control plan, and we documented to the Wetlands Commission the geographic extent and what that would involve. Number 9 is the conservation easement, 11 acres, almost more than 40% of the site. I think, frankly, a part of the application that has sort of been overlooked by the neighbors. That's not only is it a very significant amount of acreage, but it's between the development and the East Rutland Road area. And the conservation easement language was, in the spirit of compromise, worked out with the Wetlands Agency and the Conservation Commission over several meetings. Number 10, we have agreed to remove debris, some of it accumulated automotive debris that is on the site, so we will be cleaning up the site. And then number 12 is probably the main one that was discussed at the Wetlands Commission last week. You'll recall some of the neighbors expressing a concern which we did not believe was warranted action because of the phase 1 environmental review that we had done, but the neighbors convinced the Wetlands Commission, and the applicant has agreed to conduct environmental testing in the form of testing sediment and stormwater in the temporary and permanent stormwater basins to ensure that there are no pollutants being conveyed to the wetlands, especially off-site, wetlands. If we do that, the testing results will be provided to the Wetlands Agency, and if the last line is, should the testing reveal any actionable level of pollutants, the applicant will develop and implement a remediation plan to assure protection of the receiving waters. So again, we don't believe that was necessary, but we've, in the spirit of compromise, agreed to that condition as an accommodation to the neighbors. The second item is a revised snow storage plan, which was requested by one of the members of the Wetlands Agency and has been reviewed by the city engineer, Mr. Wasmer. Now, I believe you also have two letters from Dr. Brian Jones of UConn, the state archaeologist. He did a July 7th letter that was based on some misinformation. I don't know where it was conveyed to him, but he was under the impression that there was federal subsidy money involved in this construction, and someone now has apparently straightened him out on that. There is no federal or state or any other government subsidy money involved in this development that could trigger a different level of archaeological review. But on top of that, I think you've heard now several times, the site has two areas: the 11-acre conservation area that is not going to be disturbed, and the development area, which was highly disturbed. I mean, scraped down to all of its topsoil in the 80s and 90s. And in the July 20th letter, yesterday, received by Mr. Sulkus from Dr. Jones, he makes the point that if there are aerial photographs that show that the site has been previously disturbed, then an archaeological study would not be warranted, and that is in fact the case. And I will put on the record that I called Dr. Jones myself this morning to make him aware that we did have an extensive aerial photographs going back some 50 or 60 years that showed the site to be highly disturbed, and therefore we did not think that any archaeological study in the development area was warranted. So with that, Mr. Chairman, you are up to date, and so I will now sit down and just reserve my right to make some final comments when you tell me that's appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Actually, any comments from staff before we get to questions from them?
Just to make you aware, the fire department did review the latest update to the plan, and they approved it.
Any questions from the board? Ms. Servine.
Just a quick question, Mr. Hauser. I was interested in the issue of pesticides and herbicides.
I'm sorry, I can't.
I was interested in the issue of the pesticides and herbicides, the plan to control those or limit them. Can you be more specific about how they will be limited?
Yes. There will be, that's condition number 14 of the wetlands approval. There will be, as part of the landscaping plan and the final site plan submitted to the wetlands, there will be a list and approval of the materials that will be used in the nature of herbicides and pesticides. I can tell you it will be all essentially organic, and certainly the science of herbicides and pesticides has evolved. We no longer use chloridane or any of the chlorinated solvents, so it's all pretty much biodegradable and non-toxic. So, but that would be verified by the wetlands agent as part of the process.
And I have a question. A lot of the people that come in opposition always say that they wish they had a traffic expert and that they can't afford them, the community can't afford them. I'm not asking about your expert specifically, but on average, how much does a traffic expert cost?
Between $7,500 and $15,000 for a development of this size. And what I'm basing that on is, it depends on where you start, but you have to do the traffic counts in the field, and that's partly dependent on how many streets and intersections you need to review. You need to do your review of traffic crashes, you need to do your sightline analysis, and you need to do essentially your pavement, analyze the existing pavement, make sure it's safe, there's no ruts, no bumps, nothing that would cause a traffic crash. So, obviously it is a little bit dependent on the nature of the plan, but I think a range $7,500 to $15,000 would be, in my experience, what I've seen my clients pay.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board? Seeing none, we will open this up to public comment. Again, I'll read the procedure, and again, it's going to be people in favor of the application first, and then people in opposition. If you could again approach the podium, please clearly state and spell your name for the record, and give your address. Address all comments to the commission. Please refrain from repeating anything you said at the last meeting. We do have a pretty extensive record as is. If you want to speak about anything new, you're obviously able to do that. And please be as clear and succinct as possible, and please try to keep your comments under 3 minutes. If anyone is for the application, please come to the podium. Seeing no one, if you're against the application, you could come to the podium.
My name is June O'Connell, and my address is 102 East Rutland Road. Good evening, and thank you. In my opinion, these applicants have lied. They've omitted pertinent facts. They changed their plans so many times, and things were so confusing to everyone. All their permits were all filed at the same time, applied for. So they were hoping that people wouldn't be able to run around and check on everything. It was almost impossible to check everything, everywhere, for every application they filed. They tried to deceive us by talking around the issues they wanted to hide. They were hoping to mislead our city departments, our Planning and Zoning Board, and the people of Milford. They showed an emergency access on the road on their map, and it's just an unpaved gravel easement for sewer lines. The type of emergency vehicles that are needed for this development, the 30-ton ladder trucks, could never travel that path. Chief Healy himself told me, and he told my other neighbors the same thing. He thought it was a paved road. He unfortunately retired from his vacation. He just never came back. I mentioned that. If you remember at an earlier hearing, Mr. Gilmore stated it was never supposed to be an emergency access road. They were just calling it that because it was marked access road. It was meant on purpose to be misleading. They repeatedly stated their obligation to maintain and keep this easement clean and passable, just as they're contracted and obligated to do now. I'd like to submit these photos to document the fact that they do not do as they are obligated by contracts to do. I'd also like to submit something else. The petition, I have more signatures for that and an affidavit that I'd like to also submit. This brings it to just shy of 1,500 signatures against it. So that shows, and it documents the fact that they do not do as they are obligated by contract to do. There are many serious safety reasons for this not to go in, very serious ones. They did no phase 2 testing, knowing that the previous use of the property was what it was. They knew that, and they still did no phase 2 testing. Or was that why they didn't do the phase 2 testing? They repeatedly claimed that the property was highly disturbed and excavated all of its topsoil. Aerial photos from such a long time ago must have been pretty high-tech if they're able to show elevations and how much soil and debris were dug up and removed. They told us all the contaminated soil from 1986 and 1987 was, in their own words, pushed to the front of the property and used where the office complex was built. It's really amazing that they can get these details from the aerial photos, because I can't see it. These people are potentially putting everyone's health at risk. And being so close to the two watersheds, they could contaminate our drinking water, our wells, and our septic systems. DEEP informed me today that phase 1 testing is not testing. It's never testing because it's not gathering new information, which is very important, especially with the history of the site's use. It was very evident no proper testing was done here. I stated that last time with the proven documents that I highlighted at the July 7th hearing. There was no record of this address even existing prior to its subdivision, September 17th, 2004. And I have a document to show you. It proves when it was subdivided. But I have a couple more, so I'll keep going. Inland's Wetlands passed this with some ridiculous amendments in an attempt to pacify the neighbors' opposition. For example, there is to be no car washing whatsoever on the entire property. And they made special note that it was to be on the entire property. Really? What are they going to do? What are the car washing police going to do? Throw them in the wetlands? Another example, they will test the runoff water during construction. Should they find any contamination, they will be sure to remediate the problem with the city's Wetland Commission, the same commission that put on those amendments. I think Gail Schlossberg, our senator, said it best, and I quote, "I'm not comfortable with that, and I feel nobody in this room is comfortable with that," end quote. Dr. Michael Clemens, hired by Inland's Wetlands and paid for by the developer that he has history with, did state that deep soil testing should be done. Everyone heard him say that, even our senator who attended that hearing. She said so herself at the July 7th Planning and Zoning hearing. She also stated, quote, "I must have been at a different meeting because she and the rest of us didn't hear the things that these applicants were claiming were said." Outside after that hearing, Dr. Clemens spoke to me for approximately 30 minutes, and he repeatedly apologized that he was unable to do more because his hands were tied. He told me he was given such a limited scope, he was allowed to address only water. He was told he could not address soil. It was to be strictly and only water. He then strongly urged me and both State Representative Pam Stanesky and my husband were there while I was talking with him. They heard. My husband, Michael O'Connell, and State Representative Pam Stanesky. And he strongly urged me to request Phase 2 testing from the Planning and Zoning Board because they would be able to do that. And he was just unable to do it because of his hands being tied. He was sorry. I'm pleading with you for the health and the safety of my family, my neighbors, and my city to please deny this application. Require them to start from the beginning after proper deep soil Phase 2 testing has been done, and after they pay their delinquent taxes of well over $300,000 to the city of Milford. Shame on you. You are asking these tax-paying board members who donate their time to serve our great city. We can't trust them to protect our health and safety. They don't do what they're contracted to do, as the pictures that I submitted prove, and they won't test their contaminated soil. In fact, they want to give it back to Milford in the form of conservation easement. Now Milford will be responsible for all the costs of cleanup. They don't even care enough to pay their taxes. We can't trust them.
Excuse me, I'm going to have to ask you to please wrap up.
Okay. I have documentation also of this, though. Property owner Giddy Flink of Los Angeles, California, she didn't pay her taxes in 2001 or 2002. I have that copy to prove it. And the principals of Wheeler's Woods, LLC, are Giddy Flink. I also want to submit these to the board along with a copy of the mortgage secured for the $10 that she paid, because she, of course, is the same owner. And she took a mortgage out for that $10 from KTM 25 LLC, which again is her. But to show you, even there on page 2, again, they don't meet their contractual obligations. They're in default. So please, the numerous health and safety issues far outweigh the need for affordable housing. They show no concern for our citizens or our city. Please deny this application. And I'll turn in all these as proof. One more thing is there a legality? Because they decided at the last hearing, they made a note that they want to change their name and now call it Milford Developers LLC. They filed under Wheeler's Woods LLC, so I don't understand how they can change it. There must be some sort of a legality to that. Thank you, and please vote to deny it.
Good evening. My name is Michael O'Connell. That's O-C-O-N-N-E-L-L, and I live at 102 East Rutland Road here in Milford. Mr. Chairman and all the board members, I first want to thank you for the endless job that you do in an effort to protect the taxpayers of this great city. I stated in my first appearance to this board that if this application was not submitted as an 830G development, this board would not approve this under normal circumstances. This developer has tried from the very beginning to deceive every department in this city. The original plan showed that an emergency access road from East Rutland Road up to this property was to be an emergency access road, when in fact it was never actually intended to be an emergency access road. They self-admitted that this road is a dirt gravel road, and this road could never take the weight of a fire engine that's required to service that property in the event of an actual emergency. The fire department, when they originally gave them that set of plans, nor did the police department know when they read that it was an emergency access road, that road was not going to be a paved road. And is one of the reasons that they actually approved their original plans, because, well, they flat out didn't know. You know, they took it based on what it said and that it was going to be an actual proper road. It wasn't. Even Mr. Healy, the city fire marshal, when he was approached after the fact, and told what this road was actually going to be, said he would never send a 30-ton fire truck up that road. Number two, the traffic report. The traffic report should not be credible because it did not include the study of the impact it would have on East Rutland Road. Not 5 minutes ago, Attorney Hollister said to this board, that when you hire a traffic consultant on a project of this size, side street traffic count should have been part of their count. It was not. They didn't count East Rutland Road whatsoever. As I told you at the last hearing, East Rutland Road is by far the busiest intersection on Wheelers Farm Road, by far. It is a shortcut across northern Milford to the Merritt Parkway, and it is an extremely, extremely busy road. And right now, as we speak, the Milford Police Department has a traffic study going on right now on that road in between the two properties. I would urge you to get that report before you vote. We'll see who's telling the truth, them or us. And for the record, the police department has already denied this application. They're on record as being denied. Number two, there are three actually, fire safety. I noted in my last appearance before the board that 15 years ago, Avalon Bay was denied by this board because it did not have two means of egress into the property. It was extremely important because of the size of the property, the amount of units that were there, that safety vehicles had two different ways to get in there. My guess is that had anything ever happened in there, they're probably pretty happy that they actually were denied for that reason. The city kind of passed a standard at that time of needing two means of egress into a property that size, and I cannot see why this project is not held up to the levels of that project. It should be. There's 180 people, 180 apartments that are very dependent on this. This is a very, very dangerous site. You just need to look at the plans. There's no way into this property anywhere. You know, they said that, you know, in the event of a fire, they would send them up that road. No, they won't. They'll never go up that road because it's a dirt road. Cannot handle the weight of the fire truck. They said maybe we'll send them into the rear of a corporate campus. They won't do that either. It's the same road. It's the same sewer line, same sewer access road. It's just on the other side of the property. It cannot handle a truck either. So, and the real comical part was when they said, well, we'll fight it from the Merritt Parkway. I got to tell you, it was pretty comical when I heard it. There are buildings in that site that from the Merritt Parkway could never be accessed. They're coming in behind the buildings. If building number 4 was on fire, they're in deep trouble. And in a fire, I don't need to tell you, every second counts. Not minutes, seconds. These people are doomed, all right? You cannot allow one point of egress into this property, all right? We live in a different world today. If something went wrong and something happened to that initial entrance, they have 2 entrances that come off of Wheelers Farm Road, but it comes into one access point. There's only one access point into that property. Something happened to that road, these people are doomed. Doomed. There's nobody that can help them. We just sit on the outside and watch what happens. There's nothing we can do to help them out, all right? You cannot allow that to happen. I mean, you can't go home tonight and say, I passed this thing, I don't know why I did. You need to hold this up to the same standards you did to Avalon Bay. Last but not least, I'm going to tell you something that I brought up to the Inland Wetlands Committee, all right? I've lived where I live on East Rutland Road since 1977, well before that property was ever developed. And in 1986, a company called Cabot & Forbes bought that property. And they developed the site now known as 440 Wheelers Farms Road, which of course originally this property was part of. They were approved to build 2 office buildings. They actually built the front building. They filed for permits for 2, all right? They never built the second building. My feeling on this is that when they started to dig up the soil for building number 2, that they found out they had a problem with the soil. The soil on the back of the property, because of the salvage yard, is clearly far different than the soil that was at the front of the property. They're not even close. When they found this problem with the soil, which I'm assuming was contaminated soil, they just stopped building. They decided not to proceed with building number 2. It never got built. And it was probably a lucky thing for them because they had a lot of difficulty renting out the front building, even then, after it was built, and eventually just gave up the whole site. Now, I'm asking you to do a phase 2 test on this property. We all know what was on this property. The phase 1 walkthrough told us nothing. It was a visual look. They tested the top 6 inches of soil, all right? The aerial photos that they talk about all the time says this was a heavily, let me see if I can find the exact words. I'll find it. It was a very disturbed property, claiming that the property had been dug out and moved up to the front building. I propose that they can't tell that from an aerial picture. They can't tell if 1 inch of soil was removed, 1 foot, 5 feet. You can't tell that from an aerial picture. That's impossible. And not only that, if they had removed all of this soil, how was it GeoQuest was able to go in there and find pesticides in the top 6 inches of soil? That soil should have been long gone. It's up in the front at 440. Everything they're telling you is a fib. All right? These people are not to be trusted. They will do anything to get this site built. And you need to be protecting us. This is very critical stuff. All right? They're telling this board a lot of BS.
Sir, could you please wrap up?
Yeah. It's very difficult, in 3 minutes to tell this board everything that's going on. The applicants come up here, they speak for half an hour, sometimes an hour and a half.
But I try to give everyone 4.
Yeah, but it's hard for me to respond in 3 minutes. I have trouble going to the bathroom in 3 minutes. All right? I don't mean to be rude to you, please. I'm just trying to make a point. I worked very hard on this. I wanted you to hear what I had to say. Okay?
Thank you. And if you have written testimony or anything, you could submit that and we'd consider it. But I do have to ask you to wrap up.
I have one more line. All right. When you vote on this, I want you to think of one thing. All right. I want you to think of your children. All right. I want everybody on this board. You have children. You have grandchildren. And I want you to ask yourself: would you put your child in this site, knowing what may possibly be there? You think about that when you make a vote on this. Once again, I appreciate your help. Thank you.
Sorry, getting older. My name is Jane King. I live on 159 Wheelers Farms Road, and that's the south end of Wheelers Farms Road. And I'm kind of confused now. We just heard someone say that you have no control over the decisions that you make because the city departments, commissions, or whatever approves these sites. Who monitors the departments and commissions? Who fights for us? What are we here for all these times? Public hearings to tell you what is going on when commission report after report after report says, oh, there's nothing wrong. How can that be? How does that happen? None of us have been contacted by any commission or anybody when they've been studying these things. Don't we matter? What are our tax dollars going for If we have nobody on our side, who fights for the little guy here? Who fights for the taxpayers? As far as I'm seeing, not too many people. I have great respect for you and I understand where you're coming from, but there's got to be, somebody said a line in the sand when we have to say, this is it. We're not going any further than that. We're going to start fighting this. We can fight with Congress and the Senate and all those other things, but we need you to fight for us here in Milford. My main focus is on the traffic issue on Wheelers Farms Road, and I guess traffic has been brought up a couple times already. Who actually handles this traffic and safety reports? As I said, I live on the south end of Wheelers Farms Road, south of East Rutland Road, about 4 houses from the firehouse. Since we have not been included in any study nor contacted concerning any outstanding traffic issues that we live with day in and day out 24/7, I would like to address some of our issues and concerns. Who else do we have? No one else seems to be fighting for it. Already very busy with traffic from the 3 office complexes we have up the road, in addition to huge residential development around Lexington Green and developments north on Wheelers Farms Road past the Parkway. It may take as much as 3 minutes just to get a chance to get out of the driveway, to back out of the driveway onto the road. With so many cars coming so fast, even if you're quick with the shift, they're already on your back bumper tooting their horns. Turning left into my driveway with my signal blinking left, I have had people try to pass me on the left, almost causing a big accident. I guess because I was going too slow for them and they didn't have any room to pass me on the right, I guess. I don't know why they would do something like that. What is going to happen with the addition of 300 plus more cars on Wheelers Farms Road from this Wheelers Woods proposed project? And the addition of buildings to the already approved future development of the Southwick complex in the same area. And the possible development on Wolf Harbor Road about 1/10 of a mile past the Southwick, all in the same area, all on Wheelers Farms Road. This is supposed to be a residential community, not a highway. According to the developer, the majority of residents of Wheelers Woods would not be going south down Wheelers Farms Road. Really? Really? I think we should study this with some logic and common sense. You know, those 2 things that kind of get swept under the rug when making money and political correctness is involved. I hope you can read this. It's not fancy schmancy like theirs. We have the Post Road here, Wheelers Farms here, the Parkways up north, Wolf Harbor Road here, Southwick here, Philanowski Farms, Wheelers Woods there, each of these having a traffic light. Okay, down here is I-95 crossing Wheelers Farms Road. Actually, Wheelers Farms crosses over the thruway. So, for cars needing to get on the Parkway from Wheelers Woods, going north out of their driveway, I guess we want to call it, they can go up the road without a problem. Parkway, north or south entrances are right there. Good way to go. For cars wanting to go on I-95 north, the connector, this red thing is the connector. If you can imagine it in your mind. The connector would be the best, and that was also up the road, right past to the left of Wheeler's Woods. Even though it means that you're stopping at 4 traffic lights, the connector would be the best way if you're going I-95 north. Okay. My main concern is for all those cars using I-95 south. We have an entrance ramp and an exit ramp coming from the south, going to the south. And all the people in Wheeler's Woods and their families that are going to the post road for groceries, for gas, to Milford Center, to the movies, to shopping centers, to all those other stores and restaurants and businesses and other points of interest that are on that highway, the Boston Post Road. You could use the connector for these, but you'll have 4 traffic lights and 3 miles of connector to get to the post road if you use the connector to get to the post road. Going south on Wheeler's Farms Road, though, a person from Wheeler's Woods can turn right on red at their traffic light with no traffic lights all the way down until the post road. Okay, now they can pick up the entrance ramp for I-95 here. Just a little bit further is the post road. So let's take a look at this closely. Connector, 4 traffic lights.
Excuse me, I'm going to have to ask you to please wrap up.
I've got 2 seconds to finish, okay? 4 traffic lights, usually with backed up traffic, plus 3 miles on the connector, versus going south, right turn on red, no traffic lights, 1.2 miles all the way down to the post road. If you lived at Wheeler's Woods, which way would you go? Do us a favor, go the connector. Please, don't approve this, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Weber. I live at 54 Lookout Hill Road in Milford. I had prepared remarks, and after remarks heard by Mr. Quish and Mr. Panzella, I am wondering what is the point of these hearings. We've been coming to these hearings, hearing after hearing, listening to the opposition, and it sounds to me like the decision has been already made in favor of the project. I understand you are working within very tight constraints. I think you and the developer know that the law is on their side, but your hands are not tied. I suggest you read a paper by Terry Tandoro on Connecticut's Affordable Housing Appeals Statute. It offers good insights, how the law works, and the opportunities it provides for presenting compelling reasons against this application. I think the law is pretty much black and white, but I think there are some great areas that you need to explore. I only have the front page, which I will submit because it was 51 pages, and I burned it to a CD. Unfortunately, I left it home. You can search for it, and you can look at it. and I suggest that you read it. It is clear right now that the citizens of Milford are hostage to 8-30, and from Mr. Lynch's remarks, it appears that you are being blackmailed. And I think you should really, you can't just say that your hands are tied. You really need to explore the gray areas as outlined in this paper, especially on pages 122 and 159, and some of the arguments that other cities used to reject similar projects. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Todd Nichols, N-I-C-H-O-L-S, and I live at 25 Chevelle Place. I'm here to talk to the board about urging Phase 2 testing. Last week at the Inland Wetlands Commission, I brought up the fact about asbestos being on the site. And the reason I brought it up is because back before the 80s, asbestos was used in clutches, transmissions, and in brakes. And it's still used today in brake linings and the drum brakes. We know there were auto parts there, we know there were cars there, and they didn't test for asbestos. Now, I looked it up on the EPA, and I'm not going to read you the whole asbestos, right? I think we all know what asbestos is and what it does. Asbestos fibers may be released into the air by the disturbance of asbestos-containing materials during product use, demolition work, building or home maintenance, repair, remodeling. In general, exposure may occur only when the asbestos-containing material is disturbed or damaged in some way to release the particles and fibers into the air. So they didn't test for it. We know there were cars and car parts there. So what protections do I have, do my children have, do the children of Lexington Green have, do the children on Wheelers Farms Road, do the children that are going to live in this development have from asbestos? How do I know my kids are going to be safe to go outside while they're excavating and blasting? What's to prevent that from raining down on my property, on my neighbors' properties? The other thing that was brought up was lead. Lead was used in gasoline up until 1986, before it was finally phased out. Now, the EPA did a study, and I won't read you the entire book because it was a couple hundred pages, but I do have the pertinent chapter, and I will submit this to you with the reference to the full book. It talks about lead exposures and health effects of lead poisoning in children and how common it is. But the pertinent part is the sources and levels of lead in the soil. When lead is deposited in the soil from anthropogenic sources, it does not biodegrade or decay. It is not rapidly absorbed by plants, so it remains in the soil at elevated levels. Lead is estimated to have a half-time of residence in the soil of 1,000 years. In soils with a pH of greater than or equal to 5 and with at least 5% organic material, which immobilizes the lead, atmospheric lead is retained in the upper 2 to 5 centimeters of undisturbed soil. Urban soils or other soils that have been turned under or otherwise disturbed may be contained to much greater depths. So, if what they say is true and all that topsoil and all that stuff was removed and dug up, how far down is the lead? From the leaking gas tanks? From the oil drums? Leaded gasoline. The use of lead in gasoline as an additive was phased out during the 70s and banned in the United States in 1986. It has been estimated that 4 to 5 million metric tons of lead emitted from automobile tailpipes as fine dust particles remain in the environment in dust and soil. This represents approximately 75% of the total amount of lead added to gasoline. The remaining 25% was deposited on the internal engine surfaces or ended up in the oil. So you have cars sitting in an empty field rotting away with the possibility of lead leaking into the ground. Soil as an exposure pathway for lead. When deteriorating lead-containing paint and housing are generally accepted as leading source of lead exposure to children. Outdoor activities where individuals come into contact with lead-contaminated soil also represent an exposure pathway that can be significant. When children play outdoors, lead-contaminated dirt and dust can get on the hands, clothes, toys, and food. Putting these items in the mouth can lead to ingestion of lead. Children can also breathe lead dust or lead-contaminated dirt stirred up by the wind or by outdoor play activities. During dry periods, dust from the bare patches of contaminated soil can readily become airborne, increasing the chance that it will be inhaled. Also, airborne lead dust and lead-contaminated dirt can settle on play clothes and shoes and can be tracked into homes, further increasing exposure. Evidence does exist that soil is one important pathway for lead exposure among children. So, we know they didn't test for lead, we know they didn't test for asbestos. We know that the EPA has conducted studies, and we know that there's a possible exposure route in the soil that these kids are going to play in the recreation area. Now, the state of Connecticut, under an OLR research report, states that, in summary, the state regulations require lead-contaminated soil to be cleaned up to a concentration of 500 parts per million in residential areas and 1,000 parts per million in industrial and commercial areas. But in practice, the Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, the state and local health departments apply a 400 parts per million standard in residential areas. DEP has begun the process of adopting the 400 parts per million standard in the regulation. DEP applies the lower 400 ppm standard throughout the residential areas. According to DEP's Bell, it does so because it is hard to know where children may or may not be playing, because DEP seeks a long-term remediation solution unlikely to be challenged if the remediation standard should become more strict. So again, what protections do my children have from lead exposure from the blasting and excavation that's going to happen at this site because it was not tested for? Now, they're going to test the water as it comes off the property. Are those catch basins going to be closed? How often are they going to test the water? Daily, hourly, monthly, weekly? We don't know. They haven't stated. Once that water gets into that catch basin, what's to stop it from getting into Weppawag River? I don't know. They haven't said. They just said they're going to contain it and test it in the catch basin. You know, you're right. You don't have a choice because the state law says, but you have the power of condition, and you need to utilize that power, and you need to set the conditions of this development. You need to make sure that they meet all of the city ordinances and all of the testing procedures necessary to protect not just my family, not just my neighbors, but the kids and the families that are going to live at this development. You said you couldn't win in court because they just go through the permit process. It's approved, approved, approved. The police denied it. They denied it based on health and safety of responding emergency vehicles. Go back and look at the June 8th notes. Captain Dumas stated that. So you have the power to deny this application based on that. You don't have to rubber stamp this one. You can fight it just like you're fighting Pond Point if you wanted to. Couldn't you?
If I may, and the reason why every application is different is because, you know, people from the audience say, what can we tell you? Well, you could tell us stuff just like what you said. I mean, what we need as a board are tangible health concerns. And I'm not saying, you know, what we're going to do, but you just listed a litany of potential health concerns.
And
so
that's why I'm going to give you all this paperwork.
Okay. So that's, you know, the important thing is keep each application separate in your comments and on your thoughts.
I understand. I totally understand, and believe me, I wouldn't want to be in any one of your seats for the next couple of months when these applications keep coming up, because it must be brutal. It really must be, because, like you said, it's the legislature and the failure of the politicians in Hartford, and it's never going to get any better. But can I submit?
Please, yes.
My name is Ruth Krasenix. I live at 86 East Rutland Road. There's also another signature to be added to that list of almost 1,500 people that are opposed to this. I'm going to hit on archaeological artifacts again. The Historical Society of Milford has the Claude C. Coffin Indian Collection. Claude Coffin was an amateur archaeologist from the Milford area. The majority of artifacts are from Milford. They have more than 3,000 objects spanning a time period of 10,000 years. Some of the artifacts are projectile and spear points, stone or metal prehistoric chisels, large axes, choppers, knives, large pestles, and pottery. I recently talked with Marco Filanowski, who was friends with Claude Coffin, and he told me he lived on Wheelers Farms Road. I'd like to read a statement from Mr. Filanowski. I, Marco Filanowski of 389 Wheelers Farms Road, Milford, Connecticut, knew Claude Coffin, an amateur archaeologist. He lived on Wheelers Farms Road, just up the street from me on the other side of the road, which be right near the site. He would come over to the farm after the fields were plowed and it had rained. He would look in the fields and find quartz arrowheads and other things. Across the street from our farm were the Kamikowski and Rogers land. Kamikowski's property had a peach orchard on it. Claude would go to all the other farms and backyards in the area and look for Indian things on their property too. I also found arrowheads on the farm. I gave them to my daughter, and she and her family are up in Maine for the summer. Okay. I will give you these things. I have been in touch with Tim Chaucer, the founder and director of the Milford Marine Institute. After reading an article in Milford Living magazine, the spring issue, I quote him, "The best projectile I've ever found is one made of flint. It was found in the Wheelers Farms Road," says Chaucer. I have been in contact, I have been in contact with Brian Jones, the state archaeologist, who is waiting to receive maps from the city on the 26-acre development. I spoke to this person, and he is out in the field right now in Glastonbury on a dig. Has the city sent Brian Jones the maps? Mr. Sulkus?
The answer is yes.
If not, please do so as soon as possible. He believes that an archaeological survey needs to be done on this property. Mike Bouchard, an amateur archaeologist, has identified at least 12 areas that were occupied by Native Americans on this site. He asked that you contact him, and he will provide you with the information at hand. He did a site report for the Baldwin Station on Oronoque Road. I have his number listed on this page. The National Historic Preservation Act, Section 106 states requirements developed to protect locations of historical, archaeological significance. So I'm again requesting that a mandatory archaeological survey be done before any further steps are taken to issue a permit to the developer. And Mr. Bouchard, I spoke with this evening. He was going to try to make it, but he was working till 8 p.m., so he didn't. He was telling me about the Indians in the wintertime would leave the shore coastal areas, and they will go about a mile inland, and this would be the perfect prime site for them because of all the artifacts that have been discovered at the Baldwin Station, and he wrote a report on it. And he would give that to you if you request it. Also, let's see, do I have anything else? Please deny the permit to develop this land for all the above reasons I have talked about. In addition to all the previous reasons, flooding, traffic congestion and safety issues, soil contamination, contaminations of residents' wells and septic systems if blasting is done, storm drain runoff, fertilizers, pesticides, and salt which would be used on the property, motor oil, gasoline, car soap dripped on the pavement from the cars which will affect wetlands, impact on the downtown parking and services, damage to Wheelers Farms Road from over 550 truckloads of dirt to be hauled onto the site, 2 wetlands that will be affected by storm runoff, 2 watersheds that could be contaminated, impact on the eastern box turtles, the wood frogs, and the other threatened and endangered species, as well as fox, deer, turkeys, rabbits, owls, northern harriers, and other wildlife that depend on these wetlands for their water, food, and shelter. Please do not forget all the signatures, almost 1,500, from the residents that have been opposed to this massive project from the beginning. It does not benefit anyone that lives in the surrounding area. Please listen to the people that live and pay taxes in this city. We do not want this development. You have heard many residents speak out tonight against this for all the safety and health risks involved. Please vote no. I have one more thing I'd like to say. The development, I don't believe that they have counted the number of housing correctly. On this developments under Connecticut's Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals Act, page 3, it mentions that in 2002, it was also added that mobile manufactured homes to the types of units that are counted toward the 10% exemption in subsection K. So I believe that Riders Park and some of the other places in town need to be counted, and I'd like to see a new actual count that's up to date and present. And when I was collecting some of the signatures the last few days, I did get one. Somebody wanted to write something, so I had them write this, and I'll just read it. 7 acres of property at the end of White Oaks Terrace was wetlands by the city of Milford. Nobody could build here. They try all over Milford to turn it into city. Keep Milford, that is a great place, the same. I was born here, and you people are going to destroy people's lives. Carol A. Conklin. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Richard Platt, the city's retired historian. He'd like to say a few words.
Good evening. I'm Richard Platt, 132 Platt Lane, and yes, the former city historian. Now this is going to sound like a history lesson, and I suppose it is. According to the History of Milford, which was published in 1939, a pest house was ordered to be built by the town in 1774. It was to be 18 by 40 feet and was in response to a smallpox epidemic. And this was to be built in the area of Wheelers Farms Road and East Rutland Road. In fact, East Rutland Road at that time became known as Pox Lane. And I'm sure the good people who live there are happy that the name has been changed. Now, what is a pest house? Smallpox was known to be highly contagious, so sufferers were isolated in pest houses, that is, isolated buildings away from populated areas, such as this. Food was brought to them, but left outside, and those who were physically able came out and got it. Similarly, when one of the victims died, he was buried nearby by those who were physically able. When the British prison ship dropped 200 smallpox victims on the Milford Beach on the 1st of January, 1777, they were cared for in the town hall, which became a temporary hospital. Lambert, in his history, says that those who died were buried in a line at the south corner of the Milford Cemetery, and that would be the area where the Revolutionary War Monument now is. But this is very highly unlikely. If there was so much concern about smallpox being a contagious disease, it is very probable that the sufferers were taken and as soon as as possible, taken to the pest house away from the populated area of town. It's much more likely, as I said, and they were cared for there, and those who died were buried there. Now, somewhere on this property then was where this pest house was and the graves of those who died. Now, this whole area, therefore, is one of our prime sites in Milford, which should be surveyed by a competent archaeological team. I find it very outrageous that affordable housing development could be built on a historic site. Thank you.
Anyone else in opposition to the application?
My name is Nancy Weber, W-E-B-E-R, 54 Lookout Hill Road. Thank you for your time. My husband and I moved to Milford 19 years ago with our infant son. Milford was a small town 19 years ago. Now it's a city with more than 50,000 people. But even though Milford's grown in population, we are a vibrant, compassionate community. Milford truly is a small city with a big heart, as witnessed again and again. When tragedy strikes our small community, from hurricanes to a child's death, we come together as one community, as a family. We reach out to our neighbors, we take care of each other, we show compassion. As we all know, Milford is a city of compassion. I ask all of you, what does Mr. Hollister and the New Jersey developers know about our community? What is their vested interest in Milford, and what will they contribute to our community? If you allow this housing project to move forward, they'll build it, and they will promptly go back to New Jersey to their big bank accounts and their lawyers, and they'll search for the next small community that they can disrupt and destroy. To them, this is all about money. It's not about community. They don't care what happens here. This week, a traffic study is being done on East Rutland Road and Wheelers Farms Road. Now, when school's not in session. Now, when so many people are on vacation, not using that road to commute to work. This housing plan will negatively affect our local infrastructure, our schools, our sewer systems, and our safety along Wheelers Farms Road and East Rutland due to increased traffic. Anyone here who has researched Mr. Hollister's credentials knows that he is the best attorney to fight for this project. So the burden of proof is on you and the city to prove why the proposal should not be constructed. Planning and Zoning Commission needs to think long and hard about our community and the necessity for this development project. Are you as passionate about this community as we are? Thank you.
Good evening. Ruth Tellep, 41 East Rutland Road. My concern is, my understanding is, originally this was 1 acre zoning for homes. Now that makes sense because, of course, back then you had to have a well and a septic system. I know that now there is water and sewer up there, so possibly you could get 50 or 60 homes on it. Why hasn't this been considered? And then make a third of those affordable housing. I don't understand how you can use 10 acres and have 18 units. The other people previously were talking 11 and 15 units on an acre. We're talking a lot more than that here. This 1/3 affordable housing that they're talking about, we need to make it 45%. This way it would be too costly, and it would also reach that 10% that we all seem to need to reach for whatever reason. This whole thing reminds me of something. I've lived here in Milford for over 60 years. This reminds me of something when I was young and in school. We learned about these good white Christian men buying property from the Indians and giving them nice warm blankets in exchange for the property. Those nice warm blankets were infected. The whole village was contaminated. That's what's happening with this town right now. And I still call it a town, even if it is a city. We've got the same situation here, as I've mentioned before, in that movie, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. We've got big money against little people. I know and I realize that it's not your situation. It goes back to the state. But something has to be done, and zoning boards should have some influence with the state as well. There should be some way that you can figure out to make the density of this ridiculous project much less, 1/3 of what it is now. This is totally, totally ridiculous. And this is happening not just here. I'm not just concerned about this situation. This is happening all over town. It's the CEOs, the stockbrokers, the people with the money who are making everything and then leaving it. That's what they did with the Indians. They let them get contaminated, came back later, and took the land. And that's what's happening here. I would like to see you vote no for it, and even if it requires that it goes to a court, and I don't care if it has to go to the Supreme Court of the United States. That's the way it needs to go. Thank you.
Mark Weber again, W-E-B-E-R. Just one more comment. Something you said, Mr. Chairman, in the last hearing when you gave your reason for approving the 182 Milford Point application struck me. You said something to the effect, the applicant bought the property, met all the zoning regulations, and should be allowed to build. After all, this is America. I think that's what you said, and I think that's fair. These people have been coming to hearing after hearing to voice their opposition to this project for various reasons. There was not one person who spoke in favor of this project. Listen to the voices of the people. This is America. Deny this project. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rocco Frank. I'm the chairman of the Independent Party here in Milford. I also live at 44 Lexington Way North, which is about 1,000 feet from the development that's proposed. So I guess I was listening to this gentleman here speak before about lead and gasoline, but I think he forgot to mention MTBE. I'm not sure how many of you remember MTBE and gasoline and what the reason was that it was made illegal in the state of Connecticut. But in case you forgot, I'll just remind you, MTBE was so toxic, it was actually poisoning people's wells, creating cancer clusters in neighborhoods that never really had cancer before. It's got a half-life almost equal to that of nuclear waste. So when he was speaking about the toxins from automobiles, including all of those chemicals that were aforesaid mentioned, I just wanted to add to the fact that MTBE is also one of the things that you need to look into as a concern, and why it was that we had it removed from our fuel. So with that said, last thing I want to mention before I move into my handout over here, because I took some pictures, is going to be the issue of, I believe that all politics is local. And I know I've heard you, Jim and Tom, basically tell us that you don't have much of a choice, that you feel that we're kind of backed into a wall because the courts basically are our government on this issue, and that you're really here doing the bidding for the state of Connecticut because for whatever reason, if I understood it correctly, you feel that you have a personal obligation to follow what it is that the state expects you to follow. And I just want to remind you guys that the state is not our government. Malloy didn't elect you. The Connecticut State Legislature doesn't elect you. We elect you, the people of Milford. Just like we have a vote, you have a vote here today on this board. So the reason you have a vote is because our laws, our city charter, and all of the things that are good governance, including like, voting on a jury, is a very, very important constitutional factor. It's so you can basically decide that in the age of protest, and everybody's got something they want to protest today. It doesn't matter if you're stomping the American flag as a form of free speech, which a lot of people find offensive, including myself, or if you're just, going out basically asking to tear down a monument in South Carolina because you don't like the figures that are depicted on there as Civil War people. So no matter where you stand, I think it's extremely important to reassert the fact that you can't be afraid of these guys. You see, I look at these guys as bullies. And when I hear you, Jim, and you, Tom, tell me that if we go to court, we're just going to lose. So what? We go to court, we make our best case, we put up a fight. You don't take it on the chin and roll over on the floor, throw up your hands and say, I can't represent you people because these guys, the bullies, are overwhelming me. They're more powerful than me. That's not why we elected you guys. We elected you guys to represent us. They didn't vote for you. This developer didn't vote for you. As a matter of fact, this guy disrespects the city of Milford so much, he doesn't even want to pay his taxes. Now, if I was $300,000 behind on my taxes, as a matter of fact, if any of you were $300,000 behind your taxes, my guess is they'd foreclose on your property. How this guy, his client, is still even allowed to occupy the property being that delinquent, to me is just amazing. I mean, it's just disrespectful to our town, disrespectful to your board, and he's up here basically bullying you with his fancy law degree. So one thing I wanted to point out is that this is affordable housing. You see that? I'm not sure if you guys can see what affordable housing looks like. Now, these are all in Milford. There's several hundred of them right up off of Pepe's Farms Road. And I took a bunch of pictures of them all this morning because I couldn't believe how many trailers are up there. As a matter of fact, in a case called Quarry Knoll Corporation versus Planning and Zoning, they were forced, when they went back to reassess their inventory for the town, to include these mobile homes as affordable housing. That's not affordable housing. That's somebody's get-rich-quick project. So what I'm going to tell you guys to do today is kind of going to be a bit bold, but I think really it'll exert good leadership. And what is leadership? Leadership's the ability to influence and direct others as to achieve a common goal or mission. That's how Webster's dictionary defines it. So I'm going to ask you all basically to join the people of your community to stand with us, not to do what the mayor's doing, because I see missing mayor posters all over town. I know he doesn't want to be anywhere near this. This is probably, too big of an issue for him. I don't know what he's afraid of, but obviously there's a lot of fear with the mayor because he's just been ducking.
Sir, could you please keep to this specific application?
I understand you're a Democrat, right? So I know I'm talking about your boss, so I apologize.
Sir, you ask what people could say to get a project voted down, and it's nothing to what you're saying. I'll let you speak. You have the right to do that.
Sure.
But you have people talking about asbestos and lead, and you're talking about the missing mayor. So if you want to accomplish something, stick to what we decide on.
Okay, Benjamin. Thank you for your thoughts there. So I'll say, in conclusion, stand with Milford. And if anybody out there wants a vote for this guy because you're afraid, I have no respect for you. So if anyone's looking for any support from the independent party or any of our people to vote for you or endorse you in the next election, I suggest you vote this project down.
Anyone else opposed to the application?
My daughter, who couldn't be here, would like to be. My name is Patricia Kelly from 329 Wheelers Farms Road, and I would like to ask you to vote no for the zoning change and for this project. Thank you.
My name's Stefan Pavraznik. That's P as in Peter, O, V as in Victor, R-O-Z as in zebra, N-I-K. I reside at 312 Wheelers Farms Road. I'm opposed to this project. I spoke to you before. I spoke in front of the inland wetlands. My reasons for safety, I'll reiterate them from last time. There's flooding on East Rutland. It occurs periodically. At times the Public Works has to put out the stanchions to stop people from going there when we have heavy downrains. The culvert that runs underneath that East Rutland runs onto my property. So the gentleman that spoke about asbestos and lead and the applicant who talked about rusted drums on the property is a high concern of mine. All that water runs through my property. Then it goes down into the Baldwin Swamp. So from an environmental standpoint, I am very concerned what's over there, and I think there should be environmental testing before anything is done. Secondly, you're going to put a housing development and have kids walk through a commercial parking lot. Are you kidding me? That's insane. It's only a matter of time before somebody gets hurt. Third, the roads on East Rutland, Wolf Harbor, Wheelers Farms north of the parkway, Wheelers Farms south after it crosses over the parkway down by the fire station, is not designed to handle the kind of traffic that's going to be added in this application. I respect the applicant's desire to want to develop their property, but it's not the citizens of Milford's fault that the state of Connecticut has the worst business climate in the country. If there were 100 states, we'd be 100. This is not just Mayor Malloy that's there, but this has gone on for 30 years. I would rather see you put an office building in there, sir, because the way you solve low-income housing is with jobs. And jobs, if you have an opportunity that if you don't like your job or you got a higher paying job across the street, then you can go there and do better. You can live the American dream. So now I want to play a name game. You guys voted on a previous 8-30G. I've already spoken to you about it. It's not just bad, it's evil. It's destroying the fabric of the community to develop itself for the future. So what name do we want to change Milford to? Do we want to change it to Staten Island, Coney Island, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens? There's nothing wrong with those communities, but that's not where I want to live. If you want to raise my taxes to fight this and any other 8-30G project that has high-density housing, you have my blessing. Please do it. I don't have anything wrong with affordable housing as long as it meets the contiguous properties that it's around. This is crazy. If we keep going down this route, the state of Connecticut is going to have a new name too. It's going to be called Detroit. Okay? I understand it's not your fault. I just spoke with Representative Sineski. I hope the problem is fixed in Hartford. That's where it is. Unfortunately, I sat behind the desk almost 20 years ago. I understand. And I appreciate you taking your time out of your lives to do this. There was one other point I wanted to bring up, and here it is. We have an applicant that wants to bring in for a new zone that's tailored to his design. What happens tomorrow, if you approve this, Donald Trump comes to town, and he wants to buy some of the more properties that's on East Rutland and says, I want to build a 50-story, no, a 100-story building and put it there. I'm going to have low-income housing. I'm going to have high-rent district rentals. I'm going to have a mall. I'm going to have the world's largest casino because I have 8-30G to ride in on. Please, vote no. Help keep Milford the community that it is. Thank you.
Anyone else opposed to the application?
I realize I just spoke, but the person I was expecting here hasn't showed up, Mr. Bouchard, which I left the number on the folder. He asked me if there was going to be closed to the public for you to vote, that he would ask me to ask for an extension of 30 days and for him to produce some artifacts from that area.
Unfortunately, and staff, correct me if I'm wrong, we can't have an extension. Today is the last day.
Yes, we are out of statutory extensions. The public hearing has to close this evening.
Anyone else opposed to the application?
Tom Simmel, 44 Boris Lane. I mean, listen to all this, and I'm really struck with the "my hands are tied" part. Your hands are not tied. You can stand up and say, no, no more. You can be our voice in Hartford. They're not going to listen to Tom Simmel from 44 Boris Lane. But when a bunch of zoning boards start fighting about this, maybe they will listen. These people are here to get every last dollar they can from Milford. But they need you as their partner. Don't be their partner. Please, vote this down. Thanks.
My name is Michael Bohan, B-O-H-A-N, 103 Middle Street in West Haven. Because I live at that area, I'm familiar with the wetland situation. I've seen hurricanes come in and turn streets into streams. We're talking in this area, we have a hurricane, this entire area would become a lake. I repeat, this wetland area, you're going to have 180 buildings in with children, elderly, and everyone else. We get a hurricane, rain, it's going to become a lake. You're going to be responsible for whoever drowns, whoever old man walks around, trips, is going to drown. Children run around, they're going to drown. Think about that. This is wetlands. This isn't concrete, this is wetlands. Again, if you vote yes, and if they do create buildings there, we get a hurricane, anyone dies, it's on your head. Have a good night.
Anyone else opposed to the application? Seeing no one else, the applicant has the right to either refute or could just make closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I don't have any need to respond to the attacks. I will say the level of anger is disappointing, but I will say on the record that I am completely comfortable with my team's integrity and professionalism and expertise. In particular, I've worked with Mr. Gilmore and with Malone and McBroom for 30 years, and I think we have a track record across the state of Connecticut of communities that are very happy with our work. I should also say that, at the wetlands hearings, we went through 2 or 3 nights where the claim was that there's going to be excavation of soil that's going to release pollutants into stormwater and into the wetlands. So in the spirit of compromise, we crafted a condition specifically responding to that report, and now I hear some of the neighbors attacking Dr. Clements, the Commission's own consultant, for supporting that condition. So that's just the flavor of what we've been dealing with. By way of closing, let me say that I understand that change is scary. I understand political pressure. I understand 1,500 signatures. And from the discussion tonight in the previous application, I am thoroughly convinced that you understand this 830G process. So all I'm going to do in closing is give you my view, a summary of what you've heard as to why this application really is in the best interest of the city of Milford. Now, I know there's people sitting behind me who are already rolling their eyes, but there is an argument to be made. Now, first, I want to remind you that there are three parts to the application. There's the regulation, and you may recall the back and forth that Commissioner Savine and I had at the last hearing about why we believe this is a best practice that serves both the city's interest in governance and enforcement, and by showing what compliance is and what's permitted on the site. Second, you have the rezoning, and then you have the site plan approval, and I'm sure Mr. Sulkus will guide you that you should take a separate vote on each aspect of the application. We do have at this point approvals from every city board, commission, staff member, with the exception of the police commission, but I do have to disagree. The police commission did not deny the application. They said they could not approve it because the parking ratio that's proposed does not meet the city's existing regulation. You know that we've proposed a modification in the regulation we're proposing, but the motion at the police commission, as I heard it, was that we can't approve this because the parking is not aligned with the current regulation. So it was nothing more or nothing less than that. Otherwise, as to the parking ratio, you know, we've given you the data, extensive data from other sites about that a realistic ratio is about 1.4 per bedroom, and this plan is at 1.96 per bedroom. That's a comfortable margin both for the residents and visitor spaces, and as I said last time, think about it, no one has a greater interest in an adequately parked development than the applicant. I mentioned this before, and I'll touch on it again. It is no small matter that this application received praise, outright praise, from the environmental consultant hired by the Wetlands Commission. That is unprecedented in my experience. We were told that the plan, that this is a good site for development, and that we are making several major efforts to improve the environmental quality of the site. We're taking the existing parking lot and retrofitting the stormwater system, 11-acre conservation easement, invasive plant control, and we're clearing up somebody else's mess by removing debris. Now, looking at the attributes of this plan, this is a good location, like it or not, for multifamily development. It's got sewer, it's got water, it's got access onto a major city street. It has multiple emergency access points. It is zoned and previously approved for office development, and as you've heard ad nauseum, it has been highly disturbed in the past, at least in the development area. The density, contrary to what somebody said tonight, is modest. If you use the entire site, it is 6 units per acre. If you take out the conservation easement, it's 12 units per acre. But even that 12 units per acre is separated from the East Rutland Road homes by the 11-acre conservation easement. I want to go back to the first hearing that we had in May. 126 of the proposed apartments here will be rented at market rates, estimated at $1,700 to $2,400 a month. This is not low-income housing. This is not cheap housing. This is market rate housing with significant quality finishes and amenities and a very high level of quality in the design and the implementation, and I will add a very highly qualified and experienced residential builder. 54 of the apartments will be preserved for households earning between $39,000 and $71,000 per year, paying rent of $822 to $1,647. This is moderate income housing, and there is not a single dime of federal or state subsidies in the rental structure here. I would also, again, I told you in that first hearing in May that multifamily residential, predominantly 1 and 2 bedroom, you know, real estate taxes are not strictly speaking your purview, but 1 and 2 bedroom multifamily residential development across the state of Connecticut, and I can give you chapter and verse, municipality after municipality, they pay far more in taxes than they request or require in municipal services. They are far and away at the top of the town's grand list once they are built and occupied and stabilized. Now, the question was raised tonight and at earlier hearings, why is this in the best interest of the city of Milford? And I think, you know, and it's sort of the same question, why do we have 830G in the first place? And it is that having a range of residential options, including apartments, and within those apartments, a percentage, 30%, that are preserved long-term for moderate income households is a benefit to a municipality because it provides housing for public employees, young people who are trying to build a down payment, people who are in transition in life or in employment for whatever reason, and older people who don't want the maintenance burden of a single-family home. Those are the segments of the population that you serve. And my last comment, again, just to remind you, is if you care about if you're interested in this 4-year moratorium that the state offers from 830G applications, this development, when certificates of occupancy are issued, will provide the city with sufficient points to achieve that. So that is my summary, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you all for your patience. It has been a long process. I don't welcome the tone of tonight, but I hope that my team has responded from day one to this moment professionally and in the way that you would expect an applicant to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board before we close the record? Well, I mean, technically, you could rebut the rebuttal, so, but I ask that you keep your comments to specifically what was said, and
I have a
we'll
question.
have to do that.
I asked last time if we could have the fire plan heard before the fire commission, and 4 or 5 residents wrote letters, and we never did get a reply on that. You were going to check on that and get back to us?
The fire commission submitted a report, correct?
The fire marshal who reviews site plans for this board submitted a report, correct?
No, that's not the commission. The commission is a board that sits, just like you do, and just like the police commission, there's a fire commission.
The technical reviews are done by the professional fire staff. It's a lay fire commission. They do not have the expertise to review plans, nor do they know the fire code, which is why the professional firemen, in this case, the assistant fire chief, who's also the...
Ron Wetmore, I believe.
No, that is... Let's take a look.
Or Chief Ito. Because both of them told me I could write and request it, and I know the neighbors did too. 2 members of the sitting board of firemen were supposed to be always on the board. So there are 2 people with credentials that can make that decision.
Mr. Chair, the report we got is from Gary Baker, who is the assistant fire chief and deputy fire marshal.
But that's not the commission.
The hearing closes today. We cannot get an extension. The record will be the record. You don't know what this board's going to do.
Okay.
So we want to finish with the board having any questions, and then we will close the record.
I don't want to drag it out. I'm sorry. But I do want to say, I said it before, and we don't want to be the sacrificial lamb for his point system or for the state's point system. We just don't want it.
We understand, and this board will not make decisions based on whether or not we're going to get points.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any questions from the board before we close the hearing? Okay. It's closed. He gave his closing argument. The record's closed. Sir, you want to talk? I mean, you're going to talk anyways, whether it's from the chair or from the microphone, so talk. Really, talk.
I'm just repeating, sir. I am repeating what you said at the very beginning of the hearing. This hearing would go, he would rebut. If he said something that I did not agree with,
sir,
I would have an opportunity.
You have 3 minutes to talk. If you want to keep to the procedures, you have 3 minutes to talk.
Mr. Hollister talked about the stipulations that wetlands put on him. One of the stipulations was how they were going to test this soil for contamination. And it was based on rainwater, water runoff. During a rain, they would trap the water and they would test the water. If they're excavating that land for 3 weeks and we don't have a rain day, we're in deep trouble. It's too late. This needs to be tested before the first shovel hits the ground. I want you to know that. This is not something that can be tested after construction begins. It needs to be done before construction begins. That's all I have to say. Thank you. And if I offended the board in any way, I truly apologize. That is not my intention. All right? Thank you.
My question is 54 units 1/3 of 180? Have you got one of those machines that can tell you? It is? Okay, I thought it would be more like 60. Pardon?
That would be 33 1/3.
Well, isn't that what it's supposed to be? Oh, I thought 1/3 is 33 1/3. Okay, okay, all right, thank you.
Any rebuttal? Anyone else with a math problem?
I'm going to get short and sweet. Neil Palella, P-E-L-E-L-L-A, 141 Lookout Hill Road, Milford, Connecticut. I moved here 20 years ago from Bronx, New York. You guys ever been around a Yankee game lately? Any of you? You want to see what that looks like? When this project, people can afford to live there, and these guys make the money, they out of here. And they'll become little Harlem, little South Bronx, okay? So when you go home tonight and sleep on this, you mentioned the word integrity. Integrity, you want to build this, give the city of Milford the tax that you owe. You have a good night.
I have a question for you. Is it true that if you have a property zoned commercial for the purpose of generating income for your city, that it cannot be overturned by 8-30G?
I have absolutely no idea. This is becoming, listen, I don't have an answer, but this is becoming a law school exam, a math quiz.
Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah. All right. Well, the record now is officially closed unless the board has a question.
I think we're all ready to wrap this up, and I want responses very quickly from you, Mr. Gilmer. I want, if you could, or Mr. Hollister, I'm sorry, I've confused the two of you. But whoever will answer this, would you just respond quickly to the archaeology issue and the Phase 2 issue?
The archaeologist has, I believe, has submitted 2 letters. The first was he was given the information that there were federal subsidies here, which we didn't, and that's not the case. His second letter, July 20th, yesterday, which I have here somewhere, says very specifically that if there's aerial photo evidence that the site has been disturbed, then there's no need to do an archaeological study, and that's the case. You have ample evidence of that. On the Phase 2, let me say 2 things. I think it was Mr. O'Connell who said, well, you know, if there's pesticides in the top 6 inches, then that must prove that the soil wasn't excavated. Well, actually, it proves that the soil was excavated because pesticides persist in the soil to a depth of 24 to 36 inches. There is only, in the places where there were any detects of pesticides, 6 inches of soil left, meaning 24 to 30 inches was excavated. So actually, if you want to do the math, that actually proves my point. But the point, a Phase 1 here was done by a licensed environmental professional, and you heard the explanation last time. LEPs are licensed by the state so that anybody can rely on them, and the only time that you do a Phase 2 is where there is evidence found in a site inspection. Somebody said that Phase 1 is not a site inspection. It absolutely is site inspection, is where you find evidence of any possible contamination that would warrant follow-up testing. And this site, not only by the LEP from GeoQuest who did the site exploration, but Dr. Clements, Mr. Klein, Mr. Root from MMI, the Wetlands Commission and the Conservation Commission and their staff have been over this site with a fine-tooth comb, and no one has seen any evidence of contamination that would warrant a follow-up. So, but just to accommodate the neighbors, we agreed to this condition, which is responsive to the specific concern. Well, what if there is excavation that releases a pollutant? It would get into the groundwater. That's where we're going to test, and the results will be made available. I mean, the city staff can be right there when we do the testing. But if there's any evidence of contamination, we are committed now by condition to implement a remediation plan. There's no going back. There's no way out of that enforcement. So I think we've smothered that problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now it's over. The rec.
I have a message from Brian Jones, and he told me, because I sent him my maps, that he was hearing.
It's the record. The record is closed. Anyone else from the board have any questions? Mr. Quish.
I heard early on that the name of the development or the developer has changed. Is this the same legal entity presenting before us tonight with the same name, the same LLC?
Yes. We provided that information through Mr. Sulkas's office back in the beginning of April. The original applicant was Wheeler's Woods LLC, which is the fee owner of the site. They entered into a contract with Milford Developers. That was all disclosed. But no one was withdrawn. It's the same legal entity that we started out with on January 23rd. We have an additional party, Milford Developers LLC, but that's just an additional party. Wheeler's Farms has been in from day one. They're still in. They're still the owner of the site. They're still the responsible party.
And question for David, does that meet the muster of it's the same application?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Seeing none, we will close the record, and I suggest, but we'll listen to suggestions, that we wait until next meeting to digest all this and then make a vote. Okay. Thank you. We will make a decision at the next meeting, but we're going to continue with our agenda. If you are going to exit, if you could please do so quietly. The next item on the agenda is liaison reports. Anyone with a report? Seeing none, the next item is regulation subcommittee.
Based on tonight's decision to take this up next meeting, let's go another 2 weeks before we go back over that list that I submitted out. Again, if anybody, I've only received one question about something on the and if anybody else has questions, please contact the staff.
What Mr. Grant says, if anyone has any questions about the regulation subcommittee, to contact the staff and they'll get it to him. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion or have any comments? Mr. Pizzella makes a motion. Mr. Dolich seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? The next item on the agenda is Chair's report, and I do not have a report this evening. The next item on the agenda is staff report.
Not this evening.
Any new business? Seeing none, motion to adjourn is granted.